Basically, I didn't put the one that I was.
Yep.
Okay, let me go right now. Okay, it is Monday. Toddler is asleep, and it looks like we are live. We're live. We're live. Welcome, everyone. What's up, everybody? This is John from Coding Addict, and welcome to another live stream. It is Monday, and as always, I am joined by Mr. Paul Bratlovsky from Coding After 30 channel. How are you, Paul?
Pretty good. How you doing, John, today?
Good, good, good. It's a long Monday, but it's always good to have a live stream.
Yep.
Yeah, if you want to check out some cool content, check out Paul's channel, Coding After 30. For example, in one of his latest videos, he shares his learning strategies for learning code. And I'll leave the link in the right top corner. So previously I said I'll leave it above my head. It's actually not going to be above mine. It's going to be above Paul's head. And I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone who showed up last time and time before, and everyone who participates in chat. That was really the idea where it's very hard for us to answer all the questions. And that's why it's very, very cool that people participate there and all that. And if you want us to answer for sure your question, then you can always use the super chat. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it, but I'm just saying that is an option. And lastly, let me just mention thank you everyone who asked the questions on Twitter. I think I answered them all. And in the future, I mean, most likely it's going to be easier for you to reach me if you send me a direct message because it might get lost in all the notifications and all that. And I might remove that thread since I want to re record the video. That's about pretty much for announcements. And yeah, let's start. And in today's main theme is essentially portfolio, the front end web developers portfolio. Now, these are just our thoughts, so take it with a grain of salt. Make your own decisions. There's plenty of videos out there who also make suggestions. So remember that a lot of it comes down to preference. So don't call the web dev police on us. Okay, we're just sharing our kind of opinions. And I want to ask actually, I want to address two elephants in the room. Now, the first one is, at least in my opinion, there's no such thing as perfect portfolio or perfect project, since a lot of times it comes down to a preference to whoever is actually hiring you. You need to understand that you're going to be going to multiple companies, and multiple companies are looking for various things. So one company might be are looking for more JavaScript chops, and the other one wants maybe more CSS. So again, in my opinion, there is no project that will get you hired everywhere. It's kind of a myth, and maybe if there would be actually such a project, you probably can start, your own SaaS. If that's the case, if you can build something like that, that's of course that doesn't mean that you should go with To Do app and just say, "Hey, John told me there's no difference." But of course, the more complex the project is, it is better. What do you think, Paul? What's
Yeah,
your
I
opinion?
yeah, I think that's absolutely true. There is no perfect project, and definitely, you know, a to-do app or a tic-tac-toe game might not be the thing to show. But I think like you need to have a project because it kind of showcases what you're able to do. And if you wrote the code, you could at least talk about what you did. And I think that's one of the important things as well. But I know
Hmm.
you have a lot of great points for today's show, so I'm really excited.
Yeah. Another thing, another elephant that I want to address, and this was really cool that during the week that we had a call with Paul, and he put it perfectly. Now I'm not gonna probably remember perfectly how he said it, but the idea is this: that it's not just about portfolio. When we're talking about portfolio, we need to look at it with the web dev connections that you have, as well as the online presence. Again, I'm not saying that portfolio is unimportant, but what I really like what Paul said, he's like, listen, when I was applying, or you know what, let me just let Paul answer. So how did you like remember during the week you told me like, hey, listen, when I was, going, I was trying to hit all my bases covered and all that.
Yeah, Yeah, so like basically it there's no like cookie cutter approach. Like this is the formula that you take to get hired. And for me, I want to do every possible thing I could affect that I could do. So I made sure that I had my portfolios. I made sure that I had my LinkedIn. I made sure that my GitHub's up to date. I made sure that I had a well-written resume. I made sure that, I was connecting to people, on LinkedIn, making relationships. All my friends in my inner circle that I knew, like, even if their grandma worked as a web developer, I'm like, hey, ask your grandma, like, does she know anybody that is hiring? But you really have to kind of take all those things into account. And I used, like, that's one of the reasons why I started the YouTube channel, so I could talk about coding. I even, tried publishing some blog posts and sharing them on LinkedIn. And I think it's a combination of that effort that kind of puts out there your intention. Man, you really want to get hired, and that's what people see and like. And obviously, you got to keep working and working and working. So
Yeah, so we're not saying you shouldn't code, but just remember that portfolio is one of those things. And like I really like this Paul's approach where he pretty much covered all his bases. He's like, you know what, this is what I want to do, so I'm gonna do all of those things. And I know that some people might find this unfair, but it's better to know rules of the game instead of, just wandering around and trying to figure them out yourself, at least, in my opinion. Again, I'll repeat, a lot of these points here are based on our preference. So again, it's not set in stone. Take it with a grain of salt and make your own decisions. And let's start with probably the most straightforward one. How many projects? I would say 3. And then every time you build a better project, then just update. So take the complex one and figure out which one you want to remove and then update that. I really don't see the point of shoving 15 projects in your portfolio since no one really has time to look for them. They'll just pick the one that they find most interesting and they'll go for that. What do you think, Paul?
yeah, no, I totally agree with you because that also forces you to be selective in the projects you keep, and you always, like you said, when you make a better one, you replace the least favorite one in your portfolio with a more applicable project that's maybe showing better features or stuff like that. So I think 3 is a really good number, and definitely agree with you on that point. Because to
Mm.
me, I much rather make, like, not 15 crappy projects, but hopefully one good one, you know what I mean, that showcases like the skill that I'm at in terms of like getting hired. So
And like for those of you who know, like who have, I don't know, not know, maybe me, but for those of you who have been listening to some of our videos, I'm a big fan of throwaway projects. I'm a big fan of building something that maybe is never going to see the light of day. Maybe it's only going to be on my computer, but it's going to help me to understand the the concepts. I'm very big fan of that. That's how actually the whole course recording started. Not because I, decided that I don't know, I'm just gonna start doing that. It literally came from, hey, I built all these things while I was learning, so I might as well just start recording them. And this is where your GitHub profile comes in, because this does 2 things. First, it showcases again that you care, and it also showcases that you're actually doing something.
yep.
If your GitHub profile is totally empty, and yeah, maybe if you have very complex projects, I mean, good for you, but it helps. It helps to showcase that, hey, listen, I'm doing this every day. I'm something is happening. I keep pushing something up to the GitHub, so I'm kind of in it. What do you think,
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, no, I make a joke that my GitHub is like the excuse me, the cemetery of unfinished projects,
Yeah.
because I would start one and never finish. But at the same time, the stuff that I explored in that project, I learned something new, which allowed me to make more complex projects and more complex. And through this cycle of iteration, I think you should fail often and as
Mm,
quickly as possible, because that's where the learning happens. So, like, I totally agree with that. And like, one of the biggest things that somebody had to tell me is like, look, don't worry if your project is not good yet, still put it to GitHub, because there was a period where I was afraid to make commits to GitHub, thinking like, oh my God, something's going to happen. But at the end of the day, people just want to see you involved with code and you're coding
mm.
every day. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's
No,
basically
that's a
the most
very,
important
very
part.
good point. Yeah. That's exactly that. Next one. So we kind of covered how many projects and all that. What stack I would use. Now, I will say ideally Next.js or Gatsby.js, but kind of let me explain. So in most cases, companies will be looking for React unless they specifically say, hey, we're just into vanilla and all that. And there are some options there, but mostly you'll be hitting this React one. But when you're talking about projects with Create React App versus Next.js and Gatsby.js, we're literally talking 2 different levels. It is my kind of opinion that it's awesome to use Create React App. It really gets you going really, really fast. But when it comes to showcasing something, I definitely would say, Next.js for simple reason that again, you don't need to spend that much time on learning either of them. I would even say Next.js is far less to learn as far as just getting something out there. Again, I'm not talking about some like very specific things. I'm talking about the main ones. And they do a lot of heavy lifting for you. Your projects will, and I'm talking about mostly right now about portfolio, it will load faster. It's going to look more performant. If it's going to feel more performant, and it's just going to also showcase that you're aware of the trends. Now, I understand that some of you might be a little bit upset about that. Like, hey, what are you talking about? So I'm still in vanilla, and why you want me to build it in Next.js? So a couple of things that I want to mention. First, remember when you're going through this path, the most part you will spend on vanilla.js, whether you're jumping into React right away or you're going step by step. Regardless, I can see by my course that people who jump in right into React, they still all the time need to come back to vanilla.js. So when you're looking at that whole path, the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatever, React, and Next.js or Gatsby, the most time you will spend in vanilla.js because that's the actual language and everything else is kind of built on top of that. And React will be faster if you already know JavaScript, and Next.js is going to be even more faster. And again, you get this, you get this kind of very good project with not that much effort if you compare it to again because Next.js is going to be way better looking than the Create React app. What do you think?
I agree with you that Next.js is the way to go. Like the only question I have is, do you still recommend people learn React first before taking on and doing Next.js?
Yes.
Because like I do still a lot of projects with React, and I feel like people who've never used React, like Create React app, is probably a good place to start. In my opinion.
Yeah, no, no, no. Like that's what I'm saying. So as far as like getting like all of those throwaway projects and everything, I definitely suggest starting with just Create a React app. That's kind of a go-to thing. But let's say once you already comfortable with the React, and when it comes to that final step of starting to make more complex projects, and eventually going towards something towards that portfolio that you want to showcase, I definitely would suggest investing a little bit of your time. Again, it's not that much if you compare it to. Again, it's we're
Yeah.
talking about literally like again just to get the basics running. You're talking about a few hours and you'll be on your way. And again, you get so many benefits for that I definitely think that's kind of a at least that would be the approach that I took. At least I would take. And one last thing that I want to say about this is remember also portfolio is something you can build at the end of every step. So let's say you learn HTML, and we'll talk about it where to get templates and all that. You build a simple portfolio, and then every time you move on from, let's say vanilla to React to whatever, you can rebuild it, and it's actually very good practice because you already built it with the basic technology. So this is going to be very good for you to be like, hey, so how do I apply everything that I learned to the portfolio? And since you already know all the nuts and bolts of the project, I think in my opinion is just going to be way easier for you to implement that. And one thing that I want to ask Paul though is using templates. So that's something I know that you have a lot of kind of opinions and knowledge on.
So for me, like I'm not even saying like use templates in your personal projects. I mean, for your portfolio, you can. What I'm saying is that like if people go to paulbrodslavsky.com, good luck spelling it, but it's a website that I created, like really simple. It's a static HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I literally got a Bootstrap uh, template for it, and it looks professional. So imagine if I started out, I'm a new beginner programmer, and I'm trying to kind of put stuff out there, and I try to build my first portfolio site myself. Like I could imagine it's not going to look good, it's going to be broken. And so what I recommend for people is don't build your per se portfolio site that's going to have your portfolio projects in it. Get a template, make it look professional, so when people come in, they're not like quickly turned off because they pressed the button and it didn't work. And then add information about you, the technology you use, and then have a portfolio section which would link out to your portfolio projects that you built. And I think that you know like it'll make it easier, and you created a home for a place to like kind of put your projects to, and then also you could start sharing your website on LinkedIn and kind of be like, look, I'm a developer looking for a job. Because one of the things I've seen, and I don't want to say this because 100% this was me, people send me their portfolios and I open the link and it already looks bad. And like obviously everybody's in a different state of learning. I have so many terrible looking projects, and so as a first like impression, put a template up, and then as you talked before, make sure you're striving to build your three projects, and when you make a better one, replace one of the ones that's not as good with slightly better, because you always want to make sure that you're presenting as professional image as you can, and all your projects actually do what they're supposed to. Like one of the like this is a little side note, but I had a portfolio project which had like a call to action which is supposed to open a modal, but I never implemented it. And so one of my friends who was testing it, he kept clicking the modal, and to him, he didn't know that I didn't implement it. He just thought that the app was broken. So he said, if you have features that not fully fixed or implemented, just remove them. Only keep the stuff that works and that you test it. And and a lot of people, they just without even knowing, they leave some of that stuff in. People click on the thing, it doesn't work, and people don't call you back.
Mm, Yeah, no, no, this is a very good point. So if you don't feel comfortable in the beginning, then you don't have like it's a good practice to build it. And again, we'll talk about nuts and bolts and all that, at least our preference. But if in the beginning, if you want to set up some kind of template, that's totally there's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Paul got hired, so it's definitely an option. Meaning, I don't like mean it in
No,
a
no, no, no.
bad way.
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
And next thing I have here is be aware of the hosting options for your portfolio as well as the project. I know some people prefer GitHub Pages. I'm myself pretty skeptical on that. I do like when it's somewhere like Netlify, or I mean, again, there's tons of the static ones out there at this point, and most of them offer very generous free tiers. So it just looks, in my opinion, a little bit more professional if it's the actual URL, whatever. Even if it does has the Netlify.app at the end. Again, that's not. What do you think?
I think like if you can put a .com, it just looks better, because
Hmm.
like people automatically assume like .com or whatever with like an actual website that people are using. So if you have like GitHub dash whatever x01, like if people like, what is this? But if you have like sportsnutrition.com, and you build a e-store with sports nutrition stuff about it, it just gives it a little bit more authority. Maybe like I'm just crazy, but for projects that I do want to showcase, I make sure they have like real domain names. And for front end stuff like Netlify, like I love, like it's really good. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah, no, and so actually also a very good practice to set up that. Let's say you go to I personally use Namecheap because even though their UI is like from 1990s, I kind of you can get everywhere kind of quickly. I think I used name.com and I think that was the name and I just regretted it. So I bought
yeah,
one and then Namecheap is kind of go-to place for me. And yeah, that's actually very good practice for you to Google how I can connect my portfolio. Or again, I didn't go as far as connecting the projects. That was just I was just pushing them up there and making the custom name and just having that whatever long end. But as far as project, yeah, that's a good practice to set up the domain and then connect to your actual front end.
yeah,
And this is something that we have both like keep talking back and forth and 100% agree with each other where you need to be aware of headless CMSs for your
yeah,
projects as well as portfolio. Multiple things. First, it will show you again how you can fetch the data, in different situations, not just with regular fetch. Most likely, most of them have some kind of already library that you'll have to use and that kind of stuff. So that's going to be for fetching purposes. Also, you'll learn how to set up nice, graphical interface, how to set up all the data and everything. And it's just going to be easier for you to manage. Like, for example, in johnsmilk.com, when I created everything, everything is pretty much sitting in a headless CMS, and I don't even have to touch the site. It's literally just sitting on Netlify, and every time I add something to it, there's automatic rebuild and all that, and I'm just pretty much done. I just go in there, add some kind of item, remove the item, fix something at it. Like learning CMSs, I'm not saying it's gonna get you hired. That would be kind of step too far in my opinion, but it's a very good thing to know for yourself and to kind of stand out in a crowd. I mean, so yeah, what do you think?
No, for me, like I got a job first as a front end engineer, and then I started learning back end. But like I feel what CMSs allow you to do is to build more, like advanced apps where you're able to showcase CRUD functionality, which is important when you're trying to get a job because this is the stuff you're going to be doing on a daily basis without having to learn Node.js or build your own backend. So I think it allows people to make more complex applications, which have like authentication, different stuff. Like in an e-commerce example, not only can you display the data and let people filter, but you could also have a page where if you're authenticated you could actually add products to your website. And to me that's kind of sign of a functional application you know because both jobs that I had, all of them involved some sort of uh, working with an API or a database where even from the front end you're writing some sort of code that covers create, read, update, and delete. And to me, like if you don't feel comfortable with that, you're going to have a hard time working. So I think using like CMS to kind of fake it and create an amazing front end. I mean, I think that's good.
Yeah. So up next we have what features. So we'll talk in a like possible example projects in a second. But as far as the features, it's definitely showing how that you can work with APIs. Like Paul just said, if you can showcase more HTTP methods like post and delete and put, then that's awesome. That's definitely a plus. But in general, you need to showcase that you can work with API. That's again, that's going to be your bread and butter. There's at this point, it's hard for me to even imagine an application that does not use the API. I'm not saying that all of them do, but it has to be very specific, right? Even
Yeah.
if it's something that you build, there still might be something that you're interacting with. So that's number one. And second, everything regarding arrays, filter, sort, search, what like because again, what you'll be doing time and time and time and time again is getting the data, displaying it on a screen, and offering to a user to do something with that data. Whether you want to show the last 10 job posts or you want to show only the ones that I don't know are you have interviews on. And again, I cannot go on and on and on and on. What do you think?
Yeah, 100% everything you said. And one thing, only because it was a gotcha for me, is being comfortable also working with objects. Like, because sometimes you might have to go from an array to an object and back, and just being like comfortable with that. Because I've seen that happen. It was a surprise for me. I was like, oh, I should have spent more time working with objects. And another thing is also like, you probably don't have to be a master of like databases, but at least know what a database is, what type of databases they have, like difference between Mongo or SQL, and kind of conceptually understanding what you're doing when you're performing crowd operations. There's a back end, and what does it do? Because at my first job, they asked me to do something, and once I built my UI, they were like, "Well, did you make sure it worked?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think it worked." And they're like, "But did you check in the data table to make sure that the entries were there?" I was like, "What data table?" Like an idiot. So, but maybe it was my job, but like that's kind of like could be gotchas. So be familiar with like the big overall like concept of how like an application works. I think it's
Yeah,
important.
yeah, that's a very good point. And
Yeah.
lastly, I mean, I know there's two more things. So as far as example projects, I would go at the very basic level, like something like GitHub search or any type of application where again you're fetching data from somewhere. You have the input and maybe the user can customize what he or she is fetching for. Then you have good old e-commerce, blog, real estate, Yelp clone, Airbnb clone, and I know might sound a little bit out there, but if we're really talking about those custom projects that will get you hired everywhere, then my kind of
Yeah.
thing that I'm, for example, looking for my courses that I'm big fan of again the Indie Hackers podcast, and the podcast is about people who start startups, just like everyone else. There's no like it's not a company with 20,000 people. There's just usually one or two founders who create that app. So what I do is I go like to go back and check out their site or what they're building, basically the product. And I'm not like, let's be clear, you're not going to recreate their SaaS product because they have spent probably way more time on that and they know kind of in and out. But you can look at the concepts and be like, hey, can I recreate this, let's say, in the React? Like, and how would I do that, like, as far as basic? And this gives you that edge where, yeah, this is going to be way more custom. This is not going to be something that you'll see on YouTube and all that. And yes, it does require, first of all, more work to find it. And second, it's going to be way more time building. But if we're really talking about something custom, that's at least something that I do usually for my courses, since I don't want to, build. I mean, there's things, projects I think that people should know. But when it comes to really custom things, that's when I kind of go out of my way and start like wandering into that kind of sphere.
Yeah.
What do you think about
Yeah,
the
no,
project?
definitely. And what you're like in lot in like most of your courses, like all of them, you also like if it's an e-commerce course, you do bunch of different ways how to filter the data, either by price, you might have a slider, you might have like a button, you might have whatever. And I think like you should be familiar how to work with those form elements. Like if you just use input field and text area and a button, there's all these other input fields that you kind of have to be aware of. And I think like if you make a form, try to make a form which has a checkbox or like or some sort of slider so you could understand how to work with it. And in your courses, like especially in your e-commerce course, you kind of use all those elements pretty well. And I think just being familiar with that and knowing how to use them is important outside of like the other stuff.
Yeah, so the last one is as far as the look. Again, let me repeat one more time. It's a personal preference, not a law. I really prefer clean look. So we're talking about three, four sections, and just the basic info, just to showcase that where you can get the projects and all that. And in my experience, I wouldn't go too crazy with animations because like if somebody nails it, awesome. But I see 9 out of 10. It's just in my
That's fair.
opinion, like again, if you want to showcase a project where you're doing animations crazy, awesome. That's a good choice. But as far as your portfolio, at least personally, I don't think that's the place to do it. And then I think I have the last one is about the ideas. Well, like we keep talking, theme forest. Go there, type Figma, take a small tutorial on Figma how you can just read, the the layout, so you know where to position the buttons, the links, and all that. And then Dribble is kind of also my other
Yeah.
go to place. Sorry. Last thing, I don't suggest copying. If you see somebody else's portfolio, I don't suggest copying them from that person, because if you're copying, probably there's somebody else already out
Yeah.
there. And I have read where people in companies getting really frustrated where they're like, hey, listen, we have 10 people with the same portfolio. This is kind of a red flag. So again, you can make your own choices, but if I would take if you want to take something, then at least either add your own kind of juice to it, or take just some parts, not like literally taking the whole thing. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
What do you think as far as the
Yeah.
look?
You definitely, want to use stuff for inspiration, but create your own thing and definitely put your flair on it. But at the same time, as web developers, we're not web designers, so you don't have to kind of recreate or reinvent the wheel, and that's why you could find some, UI kits or whatever to get inspiration to build stuff. But definitely. And I know you're going to talk about the type of maybe projects to make, either like an e-commerce store or a blog. Like what do you recommend? What's some of the things that you recommend?
The I would go again with that, with the most basic variation.
Is
I
the
would say
GitHub search?
is some kind of search. Again, there's plenty of APIs you can use. That the rapid APIs. I haven't used it too much myself, but I understand that it's very very powerful, where you can get a bunch of them.
Yeah, you can do everything.
And then I would use something like that. So imagine if you have tons of data, you can recreate like a small version of Algolia. So for those of you who don't know, Algolia is like a search option that you can add to your site, and it's very fast and awesome. But if you go to their docs and everything, you can see that the samples that they offer. And again, you don't need to be as performant, but you can showcase, hey, listen, so there's I don't know, 1,000 items coming in, and then the user can filter by many. Like Paul just said, not only you search the input, you also showcase how to do it with checkboxes, with whatever sliders, and this will give you a very good practice, and will showcase that you actually do those things. And yeah, the e-commerce, the blog, and all that. So I know it's not, again, the custom stuff, because I mean there's already tons of them out there. But as far as the basic, I think that's kind of where you need to start, and then
Yeah.
progress slowly.
Yeah. No, definitely 100%.
I think we kind of covered everything, right? I think we're pretty much done.
Yeah, that's
uh
good. Now you could do some questions or,
yeah, let's
I can.
jump into questions. Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
It's okay. I was going to give my 2 cents, just because I keep always harping back on this idea. Make sure you guys practice CRUD. Make sure you practice CRUD. Not because like I just like saying make sure you guys practice CRUD. It's because when I first started working, no matter what we did, there was some sort of CRUD functionality that I had to do. And so that's why for the first 3 months I felt like I was going to get fired, because it's not something that I felt like I spent enough time. And so building like your first project, like John says, and he did say bare minimum, like make sure you're doing some sort of API and some sort of search. But but all that, if you think about it, all of it is just displaying data or you're filtering data. So if you want to get extra credit and go out of your way, figure out some sort of way to add some CRUD functionality. And I'm gonna keep saying it forever, because to me it was such a sore subject, because at my job was like, I don't think I know how to do this. And my first company I worked for, people weren't helpful. So like I got yelled at a lot, and so I'm just trying to save you guys some time, you know.
I want to agree with Paul's point 100%, because I'm in that camp where I think it's kind of become really cool to attack CRUD, because there is literally a million applications on CRUD, and I
Yeah.
get that. But at the same time, nothing will teach you as far as the basics of the thing that you're
Yeah.
learning, and actually get you in a place where you can start building something more than building a CRUD and I know it sounds silly, the to dos and all that, but again, the general idea. Once you learn that, that's already a very good starting point for you to kind of move on. And again, that's not something that you put in the portfolio, but it's something definitely you should know. And for everyone who is kind of dissing CRUD, I want to ask, like, well, show me a better approach how to learn the basics of that technology,
You use
right?
it all the time. Like you can't build anything at work if
Mm-hmm.
you don't use CRUD. So I'll give you a funny story. So I built this COVID tracker, which basically calls an API. It literally gets one item of data dump, which has everything you need. But then I got like a map library. I got like some graph library, which was very easy to implement. And the app looks like fantastic. People are like, oh my God, this is like the most amazing app. But I'm like, it doesn't do anything. All it does, it shows COVID cases by country. It's still just showing the data, but it doesn't have any like functionality in terms. So it looks good, but underneath the hood in terms of functionality, it's something like any beginner web developer should eventually do. Basically get data from API and display it on screen. So I always get upset that people like that project most, because it looks cool. It's like having pretty face, nice dress, but being really stupid on the inside. That's basically what that application is. And I just want to say that to you guys. It's like you got to make sure that as a web developer, you part of it, it's like, yeah, handling the UI, but the other part is handling the functionality that does stuff that you might not see. And like, and that's important to know. And like, to me, like if you don't do CRUD, like I don't know, like what people are doing. It's just like I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't
that's.
know. I
I
don't
think
know. I
it's
don't
the
know.
same as with APIs. I mean, when it comes to most applications, there's some. I mean, again, you might not have all of them, but you
Yeah.
might have at least adding and then displaying the list. I mean, that's kind of so. CRUD, I think it's also something that I would refer to as bread and butter, which
Yeah.
is, by the way, I'm stealing that term from for web development, the bread and
N-
butter one.
Nice. Nice. It's funny because someone I know like did a course, and it's still just look at the API and get data. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna make a to-do list tutorial, but I'm gonna just put my own spin on it. So it's not a to-do tutorial. It just basically allows you to copy links from YouTube of songs you like and then create your own playlist. and then you'll be able to edit and delete. So full CRUD functionality, way better app, so and better experience.
Exactly.
So this is what
Exactly.
about
As
that.
far as today's questions, I decided that we'll try at least to have um two questions technical, and then we can go into inspirational talk and all that. So
Yeah,
this doesn't turn into one of the uplifting podcasts. Not that it's
yeah,
downlifting, but if it's just that, then I think that everyone is gonna leave. Yeah, let me start here. Hey Tammy, hope that everything is fine in Arizona. Last week, you said that React 18 is coming out and you would be recording the course. Yes, I will. Should we wait to do the course until the new one is ready, or will the old stuff will be available? So with this update, for sure, I'll make some kind of way so people can either watch it, the old stuff on YouTube on some kind of private link or whatever. But as far as should you watch it now, yes, you should, because like there is a kind of major thing coming as far as suspense, because it's basically eventually like it's already there, but it's just not implemented the way it should be yet. But it's not like 90% of whatever is already course is relevant. We're just talking about that 10% that I want to add, and the only reason why there's going to be chunks that I'm will re-record because I've been getting a bunch of questions, so I kind of already know where the people are hitting some roadblocks. I also have ideas for more complex projects that I'm going to add. So effectively, the like when we're talking about the course, bunch of the small projects and all that are still, you'll still use them. It's going to be the same functionality, but there's going to be some small updates of how you can do differently stuff with the React. And then there's going to be, since there is this major update, I also wanted to add some uh, bigger, better projects that I personally over the time have noticed and decided. So hopefully that kind of explains that. Again, when we're talking about React, the update, it's not doesn't mean that everything that right now React has just goes to nowhere and it's useless. No, it's they're adding some things that are going to be very important, but whatever we have right now is not obsolete or anything like that.
yeah.
We
It's not
have,
like Angular and Angular 2.
I think they're up to 9 or something, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We have Andrew from Arkansas. Yeah, we talked with Andrew on Twitter. Hope everyone is having a good Monday. Yeah, the same to you, Andrew. Hopefully it's not too late. I mean, it's Midwest, right? So it's like 2 hours at least. So we have Tammy here again. We have Jake Smith. Uh, okay, let's see. So okay, it's a bunch of just chats. Nights are heavy. Okay, we have Alex from Romania. Hey, Alex, nice to see you here. Yep. We have Andreas Aus. I think he was from UK. Okay. What else? What else? I think the Comfy Sloth project from John's course will get your places if you build. Okay, itching questions. Itching question in terms of create React app. What are the best practices when it comes to deploying a production React site application? Is create React app good enough? Well, that's the thing. When again, if you were just talking about the learning project, then yes, it's definitely going to be good enough. But if you want something that to showcase, especially like portfolio, again, I wouldn't worry too much about the project, even though it's good that you can, if you can build it with Next.js, of course, that will get you places. But as far as the main portfolio, I think it will be more performant if you definitely use Next.js, because then you start showing images and all that stuff. So I would go that extra mile.
Yeah, if it's something like client facing or like SEO, like or gonna attract new customers, definitely Next.js is a better place to go. But I'll give you two use cases because we're not using Next.js at my company. And we didn't use Next.js in my previous company, but it's because we were building dashboards that are already for current users. They're able to log in, and it's not something that should be SEO searched anyway. And so, create React app in that scenario works better. But if it's going to be like publicly visible, like you want to rank on Google, you want to have like good SEO, like definitely Next.js wins out in like a lot of ways, because you are able to make very performant, fast applications, especially if you're pre-rendering stuff.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah, no, no. So again, it really, you should know create React app. You can use it very, very nicely. But if you want to take that, go that extra step and learn the Next.js, that will definitely be very helpful for variety of reasons. First of all, again, it's gonna do a lot of things already for you, so you won't have to worry about it, like routing and optimizing images and like Paul just mentioned, and all that. So then we have next one. Hi John, I'm new to web development. I have finished your HTML, CSS, and JS and React course. Thank you very much for support. And now I'm wondering whether I should apply for a job or make more experience. Can you give me some advice for looking jobs, as most of the jobs ads ask for more than a year experience? And right after that, I have Alex. Thank you, Alex, for right away answering. Yes, you should right away apply, and it takes time until they call you back at the end of the day, anyway. Yes, I would pretty much, if you're done with React, I would right away start. Even if you're done with Vanilla JS, I would again have something already and start making those calls just so you can get comfortable with the process, because those first applications are going to be, you'll be like, should I send it, should I not send it, should I, they're asking for this, and just send it. There's what's the worst thing? Okay, they might, you know I don't
turn on
know.
a dragon and attack you. That's the worst that's gonna happen.
They'll find you
Yeah,
and they'll
yeah.
ask
So
for your name and why you send them. No, I mean, you should, like, React. If you know React, there's, as far as front end, again, this is very like debatable about Next.js and Gatsby.js. In my opinion, again, I keep repeating pretty much the same thing, but your just project will, first of all, it's going to be easier for you to make. When we're talking about, again, a bunch of things are already figured out for you. That's number one. Number two, they'll be more performant. But when you reach already React, again, unless you start jumping from library to library, you are capable of building very complex projects. There's no like magic, some kind of, I don't know. You need to know React plus Vue.js, and then you'll be there. That's React gives you more than enough tools to really like build whatever really you want. Okay, so thanks, Alex. My pleasure. I think I just started learning HTML and CSS for front end, and while I understood the technicalities, syntax, John's Simply Recipes project featured on FCC channel is what made sense of everything. Yeah, to kind of give you the idea, I know that it's probably not the most popular kind of approach, but what I've noticed, the reason why that HTML and CSS was in general, why I started recording back with HTML and CSS, because of what I've noticed, what I've been telling Paul all the time behind the scenes, is that there's more questions about HTML and CSS than about React or JavaScript in any of the courses. Even in Gatsby course, there's more questions about HTML and CSS. So I just, at some point I was like, you know what, I just need to. I mean, it takes me a really long time, and it's not that fast. But what I try to do, at least, I take the projects that are built with React and I just recreate the HTML and CSS. Some of them are in the HTML and CSS course, and some of them I kind of deciding which ones, and then I released them on YouTube. And that was the Simply Recipes was one. And there's few of them kind of in the works, but I don't know how fast or slow it's gonna be. And I think this is where Paul definitely can agree with me that having those HTML, like, this is like your workhorse,
yeah.
regardless whether you use Next.js, React, or Vanilla JS. That's
I was
just all the time.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, and they're like skipping HTML, CSS and going to JavaScript, and I'm like, good luck. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, HTML and CSS is, you need it. You can't just, unless you yeah, I mean, like you got to know it. You got to know it. Like especially if you're doing front end. Like if you're doing like back end only, I could understand, but anything with front end, no matter what stack you pick, you need to be like comfortable with HTML and CSS for sure. Um,
Yeah, I
but
just started like working on the first MER project, and the first whatever few days I've spent. Yes, I'm. Of course, everything is done in React and all that, and yes, there's database. But if I have to pinpoint what I spent my most day on, it's pretty much I have designs that I want to build,
yep,
and I just keep creating them. And when it comes to actual React functionality, it's setting up few use states, few use effects, but the rest of it is just hey, how I can get that UI looking like that. And this is going to be continuous. Again, there's a difference if and when you start working for a company. They use libraries. So again, that's something you need to be aware of. That yeah, some people you maybe might not use the actual HTML and CSS, but you will still have to build some kind of elements with
yep.
that library for sure. So somebody tell me, is it worth to learn React Native? A couple of things. First of all, I'm not really familiar with any of the mobile ones, but I can tell you one thing, that it's kind of funny where the moment some big company drops React Native, then everybody runs away, or not just React Native, any kind of library. Then everybody runs away, and then let's say 1 month or 1 year later, that company picks it back up, and then it's like, well, it wasn't maybe that bad after all. I know that there was this big fuss because who dumped React Native? Wasn't Facebook?
Twitter or somebody, I don't remember. I
Yeah,
think it was Twitter.
something big, and then of course there
Yeah,
was 10,000
everybody's
videos on
like,
YouTube that
yeah.
yeah, React Native is dead, and
Look,
looks like it's still kicking.
like to me somebody said that like oh they dropped whatever. I'm like, yeah, I'm a JavaScript developer, I already know React, I'm doing Next.js. So what would make sense for me to learn Kotlin for Android development? No, I'll just use React Native because I'm already familiar with it, if I really needed to make a need to build an app. So I think like if you're already in JavaScript, like keep going JavaScript. Like this is like a weird example because in C sharp land they have Blazor, which they're saying is going to kill JavaScript. No, it won't kill JavaScript. It's just a way for we have React to create like single page application. It's a way for C sharp developers to be able to create the same thing with C sharp because they don't want to learn React. And so like whatever your strength is, like if you're doing JavaScript, stay in JavaScript land unless you have any reason to do something else. If you're in like PHP and Laravel, stay in that. If you're doing, C sharp with whatever, stay there. Like they're all will get you a job, but like don't be like having this fight. Oh, should I do this? Should I do that? It's like you should do something that you get good at, and you're gonna get there. And so to me, like we actually talked about this before getting on to the stream, this importance of saying no. And you kind of mentioned why that's important. Like you can't do everything. You gotta, set your scope.
Yeah, that's that we were gonna do probably one of the upcoming ones where the
Okay,
main
yeah,
the main kind
same
of
because
thing is
that's a
going to
big
be about
topic,
saying no, because
huge
that's
topic.
actually way more important than saying yes. Now, one thing I do want to add, I did, I don't know, a year ago, I spoke with one developer from Miami who was doing mobile, at least for his company, and he was raving about Flutter, and he wasn't so excited about React Native, and that not because some company dumped him, but he was just telling me that it's just it's way better the Flutter. So that's as far as I know. Hopefully that is helpful. How well should you know React before learning Next or Gatsby? Well, for me, it comes down to do you understand hooks? Because at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not talking about like you should understand the components and everything, but again, your Next.js or Gatsby.js applications will be only as complex as your components. Because yes, they'll handle again a bunch of things for you, but they're not gonna
Write the
create the
code,
stuff
yeah,
for
write
you,
the code.
right? So you cannot if you for example don't know what is use effect, then again, I'm not saying you will have to use effect all the time there. There's different strategies to get the data in there, which because use effect I mean, I'm not saying all the time, but in most, like a lot of times, it's used for data fetching. At least for now, that's where the suspense eventually will kick in. But you should know how use states and all that kind of work. If you can create those components and create React app, that's going to be what you're doing over there. So hopefully that answers. What do you think,
Since
Paul?
definitely I agree with you, but I did have a question for you because when I first started React, it was no hooks yet. It was all classes, and then eventually they introduced hooks. So someone now new starting, would you recommend they start with just all the modern stuff first, and then go back and review class, or go learn class first and then no? Yeah, same,
No,
because
I,
that's gonna
I,
confuse the crap out of
that's
people.
why I re-recorded the course and everything. It's my opinion that, and it is a little bit annoying because it was literally like hooks came out like one to 2 months and everybody
Yeah,
wrote off classes. But the thing is, it's not about what I think. The reason why I say that because I see that in production, friends who work in the industry, they are using them. So it's not because I like hooks better, but if production companies switch to that, that
yeah.
means that that is already happening. So I don't see any real reason. Yeah, there's a bunch of code base out there that is still using classes. Yes, you should at least spend like an hour to understand kind of the idea of like a component and mount and all that. Just because again, you might go
Might
through
run
some
into that.
code, but again, I wouldn't spend the enormous amount of time studying that. And if the company that uses still classes, they they will give you that time to kind of
Yeah,
to
get
to
ready
to
for it.
to, to get up and running.
Yeah, no, I love hooks, and like being able to write custom hooks is good. And then now you could avoid a lot of like higher order components just with using hooks and stuff, which is good because nobody
Yeah,
likes higher
I
order
don't.
components.
Do you
That's
remember
nobody likes that.
the oh jeez. Remember when context first came out? Not first came out, but first when it was kind of established,
Yeah.
and then they had this like higher order
Oh my
the
God. Yeah.
setup when
Yeah.
you're
Terrible.
passing it, and that
Yeah.
was from an explanation like standpoint that was a lot of fun to kind of explain that and all that. But yeah, no, I definitely would jump into hooks right away, and then if you ever need to, you can go back to classes. So that's gonna be the case. John, will you? I think it's assuming. Will you create course material UI for React? No, this is not me being negative, but I don't like material UI. I cannot stand 20,000 components to import. Again, I have friends who work with it, so I'm not saying it's a bad technology. I personally just don't like using it because I feel like you know like I was telling Paul, I mean, for me, at the end of the day, it comes down to everything that I create. I'll have to record, and there's no way I can, you know, first of all, record with 20,000 components coming into that one file, and that's number one. Number two, I'm just like I don't enjoy that. I rather code it and kind of set it up myself as far as HTML and CSS because that kind of keeps me, in kind of to understand. What do you think? As far as
Only if
material,
if my job's paying me, I will do it. But for my personal projects, I'll give you one mistake I made. I had this excellent idea for a project, but I was like, oh, let me use Material UI, and they just added so much extra work I had to do that I just lost motivation. Like it didn't make things easier; it made things like more things to think about. So like I was learning how to use Material UI while building my React application, so I never finished it. It was like it looked really good, but besides that, it was like whatever. So I think like when you're learning, like don't rush into introducing new things. And so like Material UI, like for me, it's like if the job requires it, like how hard could it be to learn? But for my personal projects, no, not really. Say like there's another question here. I see you kind of like the follow up. I think it says, "Hi guys, it's from web dev developer spelled weird. Hi guys, can we stick with JavaScript or do we have to focus on TypeScript? Can you
this
explain?"
exact question that I'm on right now.
Right, and it makes sense because for me, it's like if the things that I'm doing work, like I don't need to introduce new complexity. And so I applied for a job that I did very well in the interview. Like the only reason I didn't take it was because I still have my current job that I really like because of the schedule. And they literally like asked me if I knew any TypeScript, and I'm like, no, I don't know TypeScript, but I know why you would use TypeScript, and I gave him the reason why, and then I said in my like previous React applications, prop types was fine, and I didn't really have any reason to do so, and basically told him I didn't know TypeScript yet. And they were like, fine, like, JavaScript really well, you could learn TypeScript. And again, it comes to that case, like if a company is hiring me and they require TypeScript, I'm going to learn it, but I'm not going to go out of my way jumping on every new thing that comes up, in order to, because, to learn everything. Like you get good at, like, if you get good at JavaScript, TypeScript is like in addition to eventually, you know what I mean? But I don't think people should rush.
This is actually very good kind of segue into should you learn Redux? Because for me, it really comes down to these things where once you learn React, like I said, you already can build bunch of very complex projects. But a lot of people have said where basically they build those projects and then the company is asking for Redux. They're like, well, can you know like how to use Redux? But technically, for those personal projects, it's not the Redux is not always, there's like bunch of boilerplate. You're pretty much working on your own. Like it's not it's very useful if you're in a team and all that. But if you're on your own, I think you can just get away with use reducer. And the same
Yeah.
as with TypeScript. Yes, it is. It's very popular, and it's like more and more companies are using it.
Yep.
But when it comes to your like personal project, that's again something where I would build some stuff with just React
Yeah.
and then go to the Redux if you're really getting this like, hey, can you do this in Redux? Because what you need to understand that if you already built that project with just React, then switching to something, I'm not saying that it's, like within a matter of seconds, but at least you already built the project. So we're just talking about like adding that thing that you just learned.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my best answer to those ones. I went through the Redux myself, but I don't use it daily. I
Yeah.
think if I have to, like, now I'm actually debating about the Learn course. Should I include it? Because I can build the first project with just regular use states, even there's not
Yep.
that much. Then next one is user reducer, and should I even go the
Yeah.
Redux route? Because I feel like I'll like throw off a lot of people
Yeah.
when I do that. So
Yeah.
that's
One thing somebody said to me, which was like helped me think about new technologies. They said if you don't know what problem it's solving, then you probably don't need it. Like a lot of people just want to do Redux because someone said to do Redux. But if you have no idea why, like what's the issue with your application that you need it? If you don't know that answer, like you don't need Redux. And same thing for me with TypeScript. Like I don't have an issue, like so I don't need it. But obviously if you work at a job, um, you're gonna learn what they require, on the job. That's perfectly fine. But not to segue and or to confuse anybody. Have you ever looked at the Redux Toolkit?
I have I just skimmed through the docs. I
Yeah,
haven't used.
yeah,
This
I
is
like
what I
it.
was thinking about the Mern. Should I
Yeah,
include the but like realistically, I'm thinking, okay, if I include Redux Toolkit, should I go the entire steps where basically I showcase how to just use Redux, then how to
yeah,
implement it with I believe it was Redux Thunk, basically the fetching library, and
yeah.
then go the
Tool,
the the
toolkit. Yeah,
should or just say this is gonna be user reducer and just
yeah,
just kind of get away with it. I don't know. That's still
yeah,
I'm debating on that. I haven't used
yeah.
it.
For me learning React, like I had a friend who was guiding me through the process and he introduced Redux too early, so it just confused me like to all hell, and I wasn't making any progress just because just the boilerplate and all that other initial stuff. Like now it makes sense to me after like I was comfortable with React. But if you're doing React and it's fairly new to you, like don't try to do React with Redux or like React with TypeScript. So like for me, if someone says like should I use TypeScript, I'm like, well, have you created a regular React application? And even better, like once you do and you do want to learn TypeScript, like you could slowly migrate the application that you did before, like one file at a time, to use TypeScript if you wanted to. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
just
this is also something that I keep mentioning always in the courses, at least in questions, maybe not during the videos, but I always stress that like once you're comfortable with React, the more comfortable it will be, the easier it's going to be to pick up that thing. If you're doing that right at the pretty much you just learned use state and now you're looking at the Redux or you're looking at the TypeScript, it's just well, like just Paul said, it's do you really need it? Do you understand why would you want to do that? And this is the same thing, kind of what I'm repeating. Also, why I'm such a big fan of people kind of building apps with just vanilla JS is not because I'm a framework hater or anything like that. Is because when you start making those bigger applications with vanilla JS, you starting to comprehend like why would you want to use the framework in the first place. When you start copying and pasting the code, when you start dealing with with issues that the code is in, you need to come up with a state because you have multiple pages and you have this user or maybe project, the products or whatever. And then you're starting to understand like, hey, like there has to be some kind of better way, otherwise I'm just kind of like feel that I'm like free rider here. And this is when you get to that framework, you're like, aha, so
Makes sense.
this is why I need to do that. And the same goes here. If you'll build a complex project, you'll see why you need user reducer, right? You will see why it's necessary, why it just makes a little bit more sense to have more structure when you have a bunch of data coming in and you're doing filtering or whatever, instead of just using 200 use states.
Yeah.
That's again, that's going to be very very good kind of segue into that, and that's what I always try to preach
Yeah.
people to kind of get there, and you'll have way better understanding and way easier it's going to be pick it up. So at least that's kind of where I see it. Okay, we have Tammy mentioning 90s animations. Yes, you know what else is, Tammy, when you go again to the, at least in here, when you order food, it's usually the 90s kind of, when you go in the main like banner is just a photo of like old photo of whatever image of explaining about the restaurant. So that's something that always, like, I'm looking at it and I'm always confused why. So okay, React Native. So bread and butter, since you yeah, bread and butter is kind of my, again, because this goes kind of hand in hand with what I've been saying, that one of the tips that we recorded with Paul was about that I would never suggest for somebody to sit down and memorize everything about HTML or spend another month memorizing CSS or whatever. Essentially, my kind of best approach of how I like to learn is go through those things to whatever it is. Again, I wouldn't spend 20 hours on HTML or whatever. But in general, I would kind of move along with the content. I would build small stuff along the way. But what you realize as you start using it, there's going to be things that you use and things that you use very rarely. And that's where I call that bread and butter, where those are the things that, or what is it, meat and potatoes, or one of the, I really like American sayings, but I always on live stream, of course, forget all of them. But yeah, that's something that you'll keep on using, and the more you'll use, the more you'll remember, and the easier it's going to be to use them. But I would never try to like kind of memorize stuff that's it. You're going to use it rarely because you'll have to look it up at the end of the day anyway. So at least that's where I kind of stand. What else? What else? This is me. Okay, YouTube, England. Oh, England in the house. Yep. I used to live in England for 2 years before coming to the States. It was the football is just amazing. Like going to those games, it's the best experience that I've had. I've went to here to hockey, to basketball, and to American football. When nothing is like the English football. Nothing compares to that. It was really really great. Do you follow any other sports than martial arts?
No, I don't follow any sports. Like I only focus. Like, listen, for me, like I was gonna come to this idea of talking about saying no. Like I'm really particular, just focusing on web development, web design, React. Like, what do I need to learn to get better at my current job? Anything else, I'm not interested about it. Like, not even that I don't like to. Like, it's just because I don't have time. Like, I'm 41. I broke into the field like a little bit like 3 years now, and like to me, like I cannot waste time doing stuff, even stuff that I like. So there's few things that I save time, but like I avoid sports. I avoid like a lot of Netflix. You know, if I do watch Netflix, it'll be like I'll binge for like 12 hours, don't sleep one night, and then I won't watch it for a long time because like I'm either spending time with my family or like learning or doing stuff like that.
For me,
It's
what is
just
exactly the same. The
yeah,
moment,
that's
because I used to live in Midwest, and with all due respect to everyone who lives there, but there's not much to do. And we lived in kind of a big city, but it comes down to go to work, come back home, go to bar, watch like any kind of the sports team that you have and all that. Again, nothing. I'm not trying to sound fancy right now, but but the moment I started coding, I was pretty much done with sports. I used to follow American football. I know I keep calling it American, just football, but not like now I can turn on maybe on a Sunday just to see the Sunday night game and just like the second half and whatever. But everything else is I find actually web dev way more interesting than that.
yeah.
Than any, I can watch some finals here and there, but it's definitely not at the level where I used to like kind of be a fan.
And it's just insane because like in whatever you learn, like JavaScript, CSS, any other language randomly insert here, is that you have different levels of like niche you could go. Like for instance, like there are people that just do CSS animation and that's their whole job, and it's not like I know CSS, they know CSS. They just tend to master their domain that they want. Like and I focus more on like JavaScript and React development. That's the domain I want to master. Even though we both know CSS, they have more in-depth understanding. And like you can't be good at everything. Like it's very difficult. I watched some like tutorials of people who like I saw Wes Boss. Everybody knows Wes Boss. He messes up all the time. And he's like, people like, oh, what an amazing developer that guy is. And it's just like you can't know everything. You sometimes have to look stuff up and do stuff. And so for me, I want to just focus on the things that like I like in development, and also only do the things that are gonna make me continue to add value to the company I work for and make more money over time. You know what I mean? Just to like, and anything that takes away from that, it kind of makes no sense to me. You know?
Yeah, that's something also that I first of all about Wes Boss and syntax in general. That's why I like listening to them. So like there's tons of again I can rave about them all day. But one of the biggest ones I remember the first time them openly saying like, "Yeah, I don't know that. Yeah, I actually looked that up. Yeah," and when you hear it, it's like you just said. You understand that. Hey, like he knows so much, and yet he has no problem admitting, "I don't know
Yeah.
that." Instead of like, "Oh well, sorry." And so I think that that's a very big thing of sticking in your lane. Where this is also something that I'm realizing more and more, where I'm not sure whether I'm going to be jumping too many frameworks. As far as I'm probably going to just stick to React, and then you're just building around that. Now let's say there's Node and there's Mern, but I don't see myself venturing into Vue.js's
Come on, Knox.js. Come on, you could.
yeah, no, Next.js is the new thing now.
I
Yeah,
said I
but
said that on someone else's stream. They're like almost banned me. They're like, we're about to
why?
ban you. You can't say Knox.js anymore. Uh, you
Why?
know, they're just making that joke that there's too many frameworks and they don't even want anything to do with Vue.js and like Next, and because React, and they talk about others like Shopify and React, like whatever. I don't know. So everybody has their niche, and so you want to, like you said, stay inside your lane, and that's how you get better by becoming like what someone was telling me, like your development is like a T, right? You have general knowledge across the board, but then you pick one thing. Well, I guess T would be like this, but then you pick one thing to really dive deep into, and that's how you progress, become the expert in your field doing that one thing. So if you try to do everything, then you're gonna know nothing. And that that that's how I waste a lot of my time earlier. Try to learn everything. You can't.
Yeah, for me, that would be again learning React, understanding React, and then as you're building more complex things, you'll notice what you actually need, and what you don't need. I wouldn't jam things just because not because you cannot learn them, but if you're not going to be using them, just you again, you can just understand how stuff works, but you need to ask yourself, like, is it
Yeah.
really something that's going to help me always while I'm developing, or it's just a cool thing that people are talking about. So
Yeah.
we have your opinion on Nest.js versus Spring Boot. I have no opinion on Nest.js. They People keep bringing this up as far as, because at the moment they released the Node course, that people start asking about Nest.js. I believe that's some type of framework similar to Express, but I have no
Spring
idea.
Boot.
How much SEO should you know working as a front end developer? Mm, ah, I don't know. This one, SEO is kind of a, it's kind of one of those weird for your personal projects. I mean, I think you should just know how to basically implement some basics, but I wouldn't. I personally don't go too crazy with it. I don't see the upside of really. I have talked to some people who are knowledgeable, and I kind of tried to poach some data from them, and they're like, "Well, then we need to set up the one-on-ones and all that." So I was like, "Yeah, probably not." So yeah, SEO, it's kind of a funky one. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, that's not your job. Like know the basics, like where to put stuff, but in terms of like going deep and figuring out how to like rank sites, like whatever, I think like writing code like with the basics in mind, I think it's fine. Um, like like I don't know, it's not an issue for me, you know. Um,
Then we have another one. Is a e-commerce project good enough for seriously looking for a job, though? I'm getting the impression that it is a basic project that may be just overlooked. Yeah, there's again the reason why you're saying right now is basic, because there's 20,000 of them out there. When again, a few years ago it wasn't the case. So of course you should be looking at it like, is it something that already everyone has? I wouldn't say that it's basic though, because again, like Paul said, you can really make it
yeah, complex
into
if you want.
a fully functional application where you have the admin who's adding the products, and everything is displayed. And again, this is not going to be the project where you walk in and everyone says, "Oh, you build an e-commerce, welcome." But at least it's going to be something where, like, okay, this guy knows the stuff, and then you can, again, there's you can spend more time on researching what actually something custom. But as far as kind of showing the skills, it's definitely, and especially if it's not something that you just took off the YouTube, but you actually spent your time on making it kind of your own, understanding why all of that is happening. So it's definitely, again, it is becoming one of those projects that it's because it showcases so many kind of things that you can do, meaning like there's so much functionality in there as far as JavaScript, and also in most cases it looks good. So yeah, it is coming a little bit like to do app, right? Where pretty much everybody's
Just
building
more
e-commerce.
complex, yeah.
Yeah. And also you need to remember that most of the time, a lot of companies that you're going to be, e-commerce is a big thing that's hiring. So for to showcase them that you know what you're
Yeah,
doing,
makes
yeah,
sense.
that's definitely.
I mean, people like talking crap about to-do apps and CRUD. Like Facebook is a to-do app, basically. You know, like I mean, if you think you're either writing stuff, getting stuff, deleting stuff, or editing stuff. Like you put a post you didn't want on Facebook, you edit it to make it nicer. And if you're not happy with it, you delete it completely, right? And then if you write a post, it's like so you're doing CRUD no matter where you go. And to me, any application that you can showcase that you're able to do that with some sort of authentication where you have content that is private to you, like I think that's a good bonus to showcase. um you know but like I just randomly came into my thought, like like a lot of times, like I feel when people are looking to get hired, they're constantly trying to find a solution from the other person. They're like, well, and I get it because you want to learn and the right to do it, but the truth is, like, the reason like why someone's going to get hired is because of the work they did. And so like sometimes like there's a lot of good advice, but at the end of the day, if all you're doing is asking for advice, but you're not doing the work, you're not trying to connect with people to see if they could refer you to their boss to get a job, if you're not actively asking people like, hey, why did I not get this interview, like, why did you decide to go with another candidate, if you're not actively, you know kind of being like, man, maybe I'm not getting jobs because my resume needs to be rewritten, maybe I'm not getting a job because my portfolio sucks, maybe I'm not getting a job, if you're not actively constantly questioning and moving forward, um like, it'll be very hard to get a job and just want to be like truth bomb. And like, for instance, I've done so much stuff that I don't know which one on its own what's responsible for me getting hired, but I just was going to try no matter what it took to get hired and not take no for an answer. And that's one thing that, like I mentioned before, but there's people I talk to and then they'll ask me for advice, or I see it in their eyes. It almost doesn't matter what I tell them because they're going to do what they have to do anyway. But then there are people like they'll ask me for advice, and then like I know they're not going to do anything at all, and they're just going to wander around trying to wait until someone gives them the opportunity, gives them a job. And I think that's the biggest mistake, is thinking like, someone is going to give you something, and instead it's like you got to go after it. Because like the only reason I say it is because we're giving a lot of great advice, but it's like that book, The Secret. I don't know if you guys read the book The Secret.
No.
Worthless book ever, because all it says, think positive thoughts and stuff will happen. Like it's like I think positive thoughts when I eat ice cream, and then I gain like 40 pounds. And so it's not the positivity, it's the fact that I probably shouldn't eat ice cream and I should do the exercise, I should work out, I should do the steps. So action, my mom and my grandmother and my grandmother's grandma used to say, action speaks louder than words. I think that's true. And so you gotta, at the end of the day, act and do the work. And I think like where a lot of people get stuck, where it's a valid kind of argument, is that they're working hard but they feel like they're not getting anywhere. Like they're literally working hard, staying up late, they're studying, and I think the reason why is because they don't have a way to get a feedback loop that the things that they're doing might not be the right things that they need to do. Maybe they're not asking that question, they're just doing work, spinning, spinning, spinning. But I think like, doing work, and then if something goes wrong, you get a rejection, or people like looked at your portfolio and laughed, it's like, ask follow-up questions to find out what can you do to get better. And I see it with myself, and like, not to, like, I still suck at a lot of stuff I'm doing, but if you saw the stuff I'm making now to the stuff that I was building before, I now know why I didn't get a job. Like, because the first stuff that I was building when I was learning like sucked, and not my fault, I was a beginner, I was learning. But like, there's a certain requirement of skill that you have to have, and like, it's right here, let's say, and all the your work is here, you'll never get there. So you got to keep going, keep going, keep going until you're able to build the stuff that meets the requirement of the company that wants to hire you. It's like those Disney World rides. If you're too short, like, you can't go on. Like, you got to get taller, you got to get older, you got to mature, you got to like get better. And I just want to say that because like, I don't want it to be where like people get upset sometimes, like, I did what you told me to do and I didn't get a job. Well, but you know that's how life is. Life is unfair, and we talked about it, and we talked about the point of sometimes it's who you know. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's true. And so, like, what I like about talking to you is that you know sometimes you say stuff that some people don't want to hear, but it's the stuff. If I was starting to learn to code, I wish I found you earlier, and I wish I knew this stuff earlier, because I wouldn't waste like 4 years spinning my wheels. Like, I started coding really early on, but I did everything the wrong way, and that's why it took me like 4 or 5 years to get hired. Where someone normal with half a brain of me could have done it in like 2 years or 1.5 years. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's what I want to add
Look,
randomly.
Paul, it only took us 1 hour 20 to get to inspirational stuff. Not bad, not bad. We
That's
answered
good.
actually
That's good.
quite a bit, quite a lot of technical
That's why it
questions.
was much longer diatribe. It's like took 3 minutes.
No, but
You
I
know.
do want to jump on for a couple of things. First, my suggestion, which is exactly kind of my approach when we're talking about something new, I do go to Like I was saying, I go to Theme Forest. I check for already pre-made like the UI design and just apply your knowledge. So you don't have to build an e-commerce store. You can build something else. You can build, I don't know, the real estate application, right? So whereas you have a bunch of like uh,
That's a good one. Yeah.
coming in, and then you filter and all that, you can stand out. And what's really cool that you don't have to come up with everything there. Like you literally, you have you buy it for, I don't know, 10, 14, whatever dollars. You have everything,
Yeah.
because trust me, if you know React, if you know already functionality, the toughest part is setting up that UI, is coming up with a how it's going to look, some of these, and you have yourself already a very good project. The only thing you need to apply there is the functionality. So again, that's the route that again, either I check for those startups and I'm looking for what can we create in the courses, or another option that I take there is I look for those ideas where, again, I don't want to make the same project that everyone else is, right?
Yeah.
Now that's the first point. Second, I do want to mention something interesting that I kind of always wanted to mention here, because I think it was around the time when we started doing them. So I'm a, like I keep saying, big fan of indie hackers, and one of the kind of very funny things that I heard there was that uh, so one founder was starting the startup, and she was going to those, what are they called, incubators or whatever, and basically their idea wasn't the invention, right? People have this idea that startups are something new. You need to, come up with the next great idea or whatever. And their stuff was just pretty much, it was already out there, but they provided a unique way how you can accomplish something. And they were basically discussing this, that people have this wrong idea about that startups are not inventions. Startups are basically, they allow you to get something done faster, maybe a easier UI, more understandable, whatever. And if you look at it, when the Apple came out, there was already a computer. When the Facebook came out, there was already a social media company. When the Google came, so this idea that you'll always be this original guy who comes in with this project that nobody has seen, I think it's a little bit like ludicrous. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't strive for that. Again, that's why you check the companies who maybe is a startup. That's why you check for those already pre-made kind of UI kits where you already know what you're building. Yeah, you shouldn't probably, yeah, just clone the repo from the guy who posted on YouTube, right? I mean, yes, you should do those things, but this idea that you're just gonna go in there with project that no one has seen, it's unrealistic. And like last point, kind of, I want to make, people that I've seen who got the jobs, it wasn't like, it's exactly like Paul is saying, it wasn't that their projects was just something that out of this world, meaning like it was a decent project, they showcase, yeah, I know these skills, but it wasn't like they came up with this next invention or something like that. It wasn't the case. It was more of a, they just kept banging on a door. That's it. They were like, okay, what do I need to do next? Where do I need to go? And kind of, yep. So that was my take on inspiration.
That's good. Funny story. That's kind of how I met you. Keep banging on that door
Yeah, yeah.
politely
We
and
should
properly. Don't annoy people. But yeah,
we
yeah,
should repeat the story every time. Yeah. So if you think that Paul is BSing, I have been on a receiving side of his. What's the proper name there? I just see, live stream does that to me. I pretty
yeah.
much
I
forget
forget stuff
all the
too.
English.
I was gonna say nagging,
Persistence,
but I hope it's
persistence,
not nagging. Yeah, persistence.
persistence,
That's what it was.
persistence,
Persistence.
persistence. That's a good word. Okay, I think we can jump back. Hi John. What do you think of a resume with a major way of computer sciences or any engineering? I am doubtful of applying, though I feel pretty good with React and vanilla. Okay, I don't understand. Hi John. What do you think of a resume with a major way of computer sciences?
Maybe I'm assuming he's wondering like how do you compete maybe with someone who has computer science and or engineering degree. Um, I'm guessing, you know.
If that is the case, again, I don't want this to be a kind of cheap infomercial, but I know that one of my students who's actually here in LA, he was going around the companies and they were even saying to him that like, "Oh wow, you have built way better projects than the guys who finished the computer science, because I don't know, I finished university, I would say, a few years ago already. So I'm maybe not the best example, but as far as what was taught in there had nothing to do with web development. So again, if as far as web dev, I think you're way better off like learning yourself. I'm not saying you shouldn't get the if you can. I mean, computer science, awesome. You know, you
Yeah.
have way more options. But as far as just web dev, I wouldn't say.
Yep. The
Mm,
one thing I look at it, like if someone asks me like, well, how do you feel about that other candidates have computer science degree or like whatever education? I'm like, I don't know. It's not my resume. I'm not the one with the computer science degree. It's like a relevant question to ask. And you're literally, wasting time in something that's useless because if you're worried like you don't have a college degree, let's say, or computer science degree, why are you worrying about somebody else's? Just keep building better projects and try to figure out how can you stand out in your particular situation. Like I'm a big believer if you could get a university degree like computer science or whatever because you like it, you want to do it, it will give you good broad education. But in some cases maybe you did a totally different degree, or like you're in my case, like I'm 41 years old, like I don't really want to go back into debt and go back to school, and so I did self-taught. There's many different paths, I would say. But if somebody is doing a different path than you, like don't strive too much on it. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you're gonna get depressed.
yeah,
So
it's you can get hired with. I mean, again, is it great to have computer science? Well, yeah, it's definitely better than humanities probably, but then there's tons of great devs who have totally different degrees,
yeah,
and
yep,
they just spend time learning and then again applying the knowledge and just kind of getting better and better. So
yeah,
I
yeah. One of
wouldn't.
my friends.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead. I was gonna say one of my friends. He has a music production degree, and he works as an architect now at a
Mm-hmm.
huge company. Completely relevant to his major. He started in software engineering, just kept rising. So it's definitely possible to get really, really high, like if you know what you're doing without a proper degree as well.
Okay, we have a very good one from Tammy. Let's go, Paul. Is it diffi- is the difficulty people have with HTML and CSS the actual coding, or is it the visual design principles to create the nice looking layout? So, in my experience, I mean, it's hard to answer for other people. Like as far as questions, it's more of the coding thing. It's like, hey, how did you set up those three column layout? Like, how was that done,
Right.
right? Or why you when you're setting up the sidebar, why the transition goes in and out, like why you're kind of moving it in and out of the screen. So what's the purpose behind those CSS properties? So I would say coding, but for me, uh, personally, it's definitely design. It's if I see the stuff that I need to create, then okay. I'm not saying that I'm just magically start typing and everything happens. Of course, there's cases where you're like, okay, what was the property and what it was doing and where like how what's the proper way to apply it and mess it up 5 times and then I finally get it, or I just change some things around there to kind of to work around with that. But as far as design, that was always has been and probably will be the biggest kind of just coming up with that idea. That's why I do like that theme forest. That's why I always say, like I was saying Paul before, refactoring UI if you
Good
want
book.
to get that. And then lastly is the have I again, in my case, I don't call it design system because I feel like some people who are way smarter than me, they do have the design systems. For me, it's the have the default setup. Have the defaults.
Yep.
This will save you so much time and hassle, and it will add this structure. And plus, once you learn, like I said, refactoring UI, once you learn how to make that like good looking basic layout, let's call it this way, right? Once you understand, once you have that default setup, you will be rolling way faster than you think. What do you think, Paul?
And what I would add to that, it's you gotta understand it's two different fields. There's web design and there's web development. There's some overlap. So I have a friend who used to do web design where his job was to create the mockups, create the design. He understood why he made the design the way he did. He knew that he had to make a button like so because it would get the most clicks or whatever it is. And he would basically create the design. This was a while ago, so he used Photoshop, and then he would give it to the developers, and the developers' job was to go based on what he did and translate it into HTML and CSS. And so this guy, he transitioned to web development. So now at his job, he doesn't make the design himself. He Figma or Adobe XD, and then he translated to um, you know the code. And at my job where I work, I don't do the design myself. Like, we have a guy who's the UI guy, and he basically uses Photoshop, gives me the files. It's like, here, this is what you have. These are the requirements. You need to make it into code, HTML and CSS. So, like, because I heard people who are like really good with design, they're really good in understanding how to make clean UI, and they're like, well, I want to be a web developer. I'm like, well, you probably be better off being a web designer. And if you're not as good in design, but you like the coding aspect of it and doing that, then you probably be better web developer. So I not good at design. I like to go on Theme Forest and look at stuff. And just basically that's why I'm a web developer. So you need to like understand the basics, but just understand that if you're a web developer, most likely you're working off someone else's mockup. So
Yeah,
that's been
that
my
that that
experience.
would be, again, go get those mockups. That will save you time on creating those projects that you want to add for the portfolio. And I think at that point, if you have that mockup, then of course it becomes about applying the HTML and CSS skills, regardless what technology you use to build it, because it doesn't matter whether you just go HTML and CSS, whether you go with React, whether you go with Next.js, Gatsby.js, all of them you'll have to use HTML and CSS to create it. We have good morning, guys, from Philippines. Yes, to everyone who's waking up or who's staying late for us. I
Good
mean,
morning or good night or good
yes,
morning
thank you
again.
for spending Monday or in some cases already Tuesday
Yeah,
morning.
the future.
And yes, 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 yes. Hello to everyone. Can you suggest interesting projects for university projects? This is something that I'm getting kind of, I wouldn't say a lot, but here and there. And I kind of a little bit misunderstanding what does it mean university projects? Are we talking about something specific that's not web dev? Meaning like, because I get like, oh, what would you do for your university project? Okay, and we have a, sorry to interrupt, we have super chat somewhere. Of course, I lost it, so let me go back. Made portfolio next, but image slow. Fix how? That's I like I like I like these kind of questions. Fix how? Uh, did you? I mean, it's. I mean, I need to see like what's happening. I'm sorry. Thank you for super chat, but it's impossible to kind of answer this. I mean, I I guess that there's something wrong with your setup. That's kind of my best answer. I mean, otherwise, I know that with Gatsby, let's say with image optimizations, you still need it to be a little bit kind of, what's the proper name, um mindful, right? So don't stick, like extremely massive images and just hope that everything is going to be fixed. So try to apply a little bit of like, hey, it maybe, you know massive images are not the best approach. But yeah, I would need to see at least something, because otherwise I'm just, there's tons of things that can be wrong with that particular question.
I'm only laughing because I still have that project and I know the issue because I used 4K images, but I'm too lazy to go back and fix it. But
Are you
yes, also,
used with the Next.js?
no, it wasn't Next.js though. That's why, like,
Oh,
yeah, there was no optimization whatsoever. So anytime I show that project, it's like like
yeah, it does
I'm
those
like,
those
oh,
tick,
my
tick, tick, tick,
internet
tick.
is slow.
Yeah. Well, imagine
Update.
imagine if that is done in Create React App.
Oh yeah,
Then
same.
it's
Yeah,
like tick,
same. Yeah, yeah,
tick,
same,
tick.
same. Yeah.
It's like even slower. Uh, where were we? University projects. Again, I would need to know a little bit like specifics of what does that mean. Are we? If it's just web dev, then it's pretty much what we just repeated. As far as
Yeah.
portfolio, I don't see any difference in there. But yeah, blah 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 blah. So we have that. What is the? Hey John, what is the least you need to know to get a job? I'm currently taking your React course. Well, the least, yeah, I like how Alex right away repeated. I'm sorry, replied. He said HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And then the next one is, well, I mean, from React standpoint. Well, you'll need to know how to build a complex project. So I'm talking about more than just fetching data and displaying. You'll need to showcase that you are comfortable working with multiple components. Basically, that you have application where you have a structure, you have maybe some kind of state UI library, right, involved already. I'm talking about like the user and whatever. At least something like that. And then again, yeah, you can. I mean, just check what is tried doing with those projects, and then go from there. That's kind of the best one. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, like same.
We have, is it okay to learn Vue.js? It's
No.
okay. It's
I'm just
okay,
kidding. I'm
but
just kidding. I'm joking. I'm joking. No,
it's
I'm just
okay,
joking.
but I
No.
don't know how useful it is. As far as, again, I know that, and actually, this is Paul is gonna like this one. Did you know that Vue.js is quite popular in Russia?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, no, no, no. It's like I kind of stumbled on that. Don't ask me why. I somehow, someway got. I listened to one web dev podcast, like a Russian one, and they were
Yeah.
just raving about
Oh
Vue.js
my god.
and like how companies use it and blah blah blah. Again, that was the only one and only episode that I ever listened to. Don't ask me how and why. I really don't remember how I got onto it, but yeah, and they were so I as far as I understood, Vue.js is a monster over there. They're like
Yeah.
really looking down upon the React. They were like kind of
Yeah.
snarky towards it,
Yeah, of
which is
course.
kind of funny.
Russian makes
Yeah,
sense.
they know the best.
Yeah.
So is it okay? Again, when we're talking about libraries, I think one another thing that we just keep banging is that they all do the same thing at the end of the day. They
Yeah.
solve those, having some kind of universal state, having the routing maybe, and all those type of things. That's what they're there for. Whether you go with Angular, Vue, or React, I would go with whatever is hiring in your area. Again,
Right.
for me, I this is something that we just talked about outside, and not in a live stream, but in our conversations during the week, where I said I don't understand people being kind of negative towards Angular just because I also prefer React. I enjoy working with it. But if in my area they're hiring for Angular
Yeah.
developers, I would
Learn
have no
Angular.
problem
Learn
learning it
Angular. Yep.
and
Yep.
applying it, because at the end of the day, it's still coding. There's no difference. This kind of person, like, just because I don't like it now, I'm not gonna learn it.
Yeah.
I think you're doing your disservice to yourself in the long run at the end of the day, anyway. So if you live maybe in Russia, where Vue.js is a king, I would
Vue.js.
definitely
Do
learn.
Vue.js.
And the same goes for PHP. And this is
Yep.
something, again, we have talked about it before, where it's so cool to say that it's
I
bad
like
and
I
blah
like
blah blah
PHP.
blah blah.
My first job was like working for a marketing company doing WordPress sites with PHP, like working on themes, you know.
Yeah, I would definitely, because if you check out, there's bunch of uh, cool applications that are built with stack that you would never think of,
Yeah.
right? So to say this, that the React is the only way and this is how you should do it, and everything else is bad, I think is just, I don't know. It's kind of short sighted in my opinion.
Yeah. Use the right tool for the right job and then whatever's popular in your area, you know.
Mm.
Just like you said.
And to kind of go with that, and if that is Vue.js, it's
Then
it's
it's
not
Vue.js.
a it's Vue. It's not a big deal. And even if you learn technically React before, switching from framework, again, if you understand the main concept of what the framework is trying to do, it was like, let's say when I just out of curiosity, I went into the Svelte. I wanted to see how it's done. The ideas are, you're just going, oh, okay, so this is how they do it. And React, it's a little bit different. This is, and that's it. It's not something like, oh my god, they just came up with this something, unique. Because usually, if they do come up with something unique, the rest of them right away copy and
Yep.
add to their stuff. So that's nothing new. Da, da, da. Classes, do it the other way around. Yeah, about that's what happened as far as classes and hooks. If we're talking about just the courses, and this is not me bashing anybody else and whatever, but yes, it was, a lot of courses were, maybe I wouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them are still have some maybe some more class stuff and whatever. But yeah, I would definitely go with hooks at this point.
Yeah.
What else? Okay, we just keep getting this Vue.js data is stunning. Anybody know? Anybody know how well accepted material you no materialize is? No, I don't know that. I have no idea. Have you ever used materialize?
No.
No. Okay, that's a short one. No, we don't.
No. I mean, it's
Uh,
so much stuff to use. Like you could make a new show every day on something new that's out there. Just use what works for you and what is hireable. And if a company tells me to do something, and I'll like, okay, I guess I'm doing jQuery today. Probably not. I probably quit if they told me to do jQuery. To be honest,
really?
just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
I
kidding.
mean, it depends on a
I know.
paycheck.
I'm just yeah. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Cause we kind of we no we basically whatever makes sense for you, you got to do. Like, don't listen to us. Like, if in your area, like in India, they're saying there's a lot of PHP and SQL jobs. So like that's what makes sense if that's what's available there, or gets the most bang for the buck. Like, so you got to do what's right for you.
Hmm.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, I was gonna say something and I just forgot right now. Um, about the industry, yeah. Like one cool thing is though that there's always something to learn. You literally every day you sit down by the computer, and I can guarantee you that you'll learn at least one thing, at least
Yeah,
something that you
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
didn't know, maybe you were not clear on it, like 100% and whatever. And there's gonna be always something. The industry is changing. It's. There's always some new kind of things, and you always find yourself like even the basic stuff that actually you didn't know as much as you thought you did.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things why really I enjoy the work, because it is always changing. It's not this, because in a lot of my previous jobs you literally reach some kind of plateau, and that's it, and then every day is pretty much the same. And in here you I can guarantee you will get some new info all the time as you're working on stuff.
I learned
So
something new about JavaScript every day. Like, I'm
yeah,
like, I thought I knew this stuff, and I don't.
no, no,
Like,
no. JavaScript is a big
like
thing you learn
cou
all the time.
couple of days, I was like, object freeze. Like, why would you use object freeze? And so I was like,
Did
interesting.
you
Like, what?
was there a use case in your job for object freeze?
Not at, like at my job, but personally, I was like, so you know how when you write classes or you make functions that like return stuff, we don't have private variables, and
Yeah.
so like if you return a function that's a method inside another function, someone could literally overwrite it. And so if you use object freeze in the return statement, when you
Mhm.
return that method, now it won't let you overwrite it randomly by accident. So
But I have a question about that, because in the ES 2022, I believe they came out with the hashtag.
oh,
So
right,
you
true.
set up
I
the
gotta try that. I
hashtag,
gotta try that. That's true. I
and
forgot about
then
that.
because I was testing it out when I was recording for my
Oh,
stuff, but
that's
since
good
I
to know.
wasn't
See,
using the sim, I'm again I don't like.
learn something new every day. So hashtag guys, use the
Yeah, the
hashtag.
I think the hashtag was the one where you
Able to make
literally
it private.
there was uh if you try there, I remember something, there was actual error if you try to
Yeah, I'm gonna
directly
get. Yeah,
access or
yeah,
change one of them. But again,
yeah,
don't quote me on it, but there was
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
something about the private one. So okay,
yeah.
this one, Paul, we can go to town. We can make another 3 podcasts of this one.
Let's do it.
Hey John, and by the way, I wouldn't go as far as calling this a podcast. It's more like two dudes
Yeah,
just riffing
seriously.
off each other.
Yeah,
So let's not offend the real podcast
real
people.
podcasters of the world.
Yeah, yeah, they might come after us with the web dev police. But hey, John, what is the roadmap of learning JavaScript and React, and what are the skills need to be a good programmer in software industry? Respect from India, Paul. The stage is yours. Again,
This
no,
is. It's like, how do you become a pro football player? Like, like it's like it. You, like there's so much stuff to learn, and like with a real answer is start with the basic, move slowly, build stuff, and then go from there. But like it, like here's the thing, like I not the best developer, right? I'm still in the process of my journey, but I started learning to code and I always felt like I don't know enough, and I always wondered, how do you know when you're no longer a beginner, like when you're learning to code? And then missed it when that happened. Like I never felt the transition. I went from like someone who doesn't know anything to someone who could kind of actually do something. And I think that's like exactly what learning is. You feel like a beginner until you're not. And so don't ask the question like, what does it take to learn React and JavaScript? Just keep learning and keep doing the things. And then eventually it's the experience of building stuff, breaking stuff, and getting stuck with code. That's what will get you good at development. So like if you're actively building stuff and you're involved in the code, then you're going to get there. But like you, like, to be honest, like the videos, like, and some, I'm sure I made some videos like that, 5 tips to learn JavaScript. It's like what are there's like, do JavaScript code at home a lot and get good at it. It's like I mean, I'm kind of joking around a little bit, but like it just like any skill takes practice and hard work and time. And like I still don't know half the stuff I'm doing, and you just keep doing the work. Like probably not the answer he was looking for, but that's the answer I'm going to give. Because honestly, like that topic, like you said, it could be like three
Yeah,
days
no, then we can,
seminar, three
yeah,
days
we can
seminar.
do the 1 week's whatever worth of content there. But to kind of give you my approach to anything is um I don't consume content just because of consuming content. I've noticed that if I just watch something, it's just the same as if I wouldn't do anything at all. Yes, there's people whose approach is following where they first just watch, for example, the, I don't know whether entire course, but okay, let's say 2 3 hours of content,
Yeah.
and then they watch the second time where they actually apply themselves. They say, okay, so I'm gonna learn this and blah blah blah. For me, that I just kind of, I've tried that one. It's okay, but I still find that if I right away, the moment I see something on a screen, and I have here on my computer the stuff, and I'm doing it along, and I'm breaking stuff, and I'm testing stuff, and whatever, that just sticks way more. And what I
Yeah.
try to do is get some kind of small concept, whatever it is, like for example, CRUD or whatnot, and then make those silly throwaway projects, and then slowly progress to the next one, and then kind of just keep grinding it out. There's no real, and eventually you'll get to the bigger projects where you'll learn more stuff. Again, it's probably the most generic answer ever, but yeah, it's you just need to be in it, just
Yeah,
watching content.
I was thinking about it, and like like some you might not know, I did like a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and like you could talk about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but you'll never be good at Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I realized that there's conceptual stuff about coding, but then there's that skill base of actually doing the work yourself. And then I realized that that's exactly like in jiu-jitsu. You got to practice the actual skill. You got to, like you said, do like the throwaway projects, fail often, because through making mistakes, you kind of get to see how things work. And like to me, when people tell me like, oh, I watched this, I watched that, and they don't even talk about the time they spent coding at home. Like if you watch 8 hours of YouTube a week and you're only coding 1 hour, like that's a problem. You know what I mean? Because there's this app called Wackatime or something like that. I forgot what it's called, but you could hook it up to your VS Code, and it'll basically track every time you're doing work on VS Code. And you know, like not saying like you got to imagine that I also work in code, but I will get like sometimes, not all the time, but I'll do like 60 hours a week of coding, which is like ridiculous. Not all the time, like, but it did happen. But the point is not saying that you should do 60 hours of coding, but you should be coding. You should be building stuff 100%, like 100%. Like I don't know any other way to learn because the stuff doesn't stick, you know?
Yeah, that's my kind of little bit grind with those platforms that present themselves as these interactive ones, like I believe there was a Scrimba one, and
Yeah, scuba.
there's
Yep.
tons of them popping up. And my always kind of issue is, well, if you're not doing that already on your local machine, on basically your computer, then what are you doing? Because that's what you should be doing. And
That's
the
what.
second grind that I have with them is, if you're done with that tutorial or whatever the case may be, how can you transfer it to, because there's no way I can
No, you can't
tell
take it with
somebody,
you.
hey, I did this project in Scrimba, look at me, I'm show me what you did. And that's gonna, you'll
Yeah.
have to, do it actually on your computer, not somewhere else. So again, people learn differently. I'm not, this is not going to be me, this is just my personal kind of opinion, where I just don't like, personally, I don't find them that useful. But don't take my word for it. If you do enjoy that kind of learning, that's really up to you. So
Yeah.
we have here, this is where I do want to do a shout out for Paul. Hey, can you guys just give us a layout of how to actually get a job? Well, Lamb, I think that's was his, yeah, Lamb. You should go to Paul's channel, Coding After 30, and then not this week's. This week's was your learning strategies, right? Meaning
Yeah.
next last week.
Yeah, so on every Tuesday, I do like where I walk through my personal project that I'm building live on YouTube. So basically, a lot of suffering, a lot of mistakes that I make. If you guys like to see someone fail, that's a good one to watch. And then on Saturdays, I talk more of like the steps you could do to get hired. And so, like last week on Saturday, I talked about, well, the last one 2 days ago, how to write your resume when you have no experience and you're writing about your personal projects, just so you have something to show people, stuff like that. And both of them, Tuesday and Saturday, are at 7 p.m. Central Time. So,
But what I meant is, remember, not you do the talking head videos now. You did,
oh yeah, now
I
I
mean,
started doing, yeah, talking head videos.
so this last week, the one before you did was what's the name? Learning strategies. But the one
Yes.
before that was about what you need, like getting I let me remember. I know that I put the link in the
Yeah, yeah,
previous in the previous
yeah.
video.
It's basically the reality of getting hired, that your project alone might not be enough. It's
Yeah.
actually
So if
making
you
the
want us to
connections, yeah, and stuff
give
like
us
that.
the actual get a job, then you should go and watch that video, because in there Paul kind of goes through all the steps that he take, and I just don't want to repeat the same thing that is going to be in the
Yeah,
video, because I know that he covered that already.
I like that. I see. I assumed like an idiot, so I got to plug myself twice.
Hey, it's better than none.
There you go.
Yeah, so we have, what else, what else? Oh, I lost all the questions. So let me scroll up a little bit. mm, Same problem, the image slows in the portfolio. Okay. Yeah, again, then I really would need to kind of to that, it's impossible for me to tell you right off the bat what would be the reason for slow images and all that. That's that really, I mean, in my experience with Gatsby, it always was the original size of the image. If the size was decent enough, then they pipe it through. There was no problem. The only times when there was an issue with them is when the original size was just, I was just being cocky. I just downloaded something massive and just, didn't do anything, and just thought that they will do that for me. So default starter, yes, Jake. Yes, that default starter is actually, I'm very, very happy about that video. Once I kind of made it, I know it's not getting the most views or whatever the CSS default setup, but I think that's one of the kind of most useful ones that people. It's 1 hour and a half and something, but I think with that 1 hour and a half, you will save yourself a bunch of time. So, uh, yeah. What else? What else? What else? Yeah. See, I was nicely scrolling down, and then I scrolled all the way down, and now
Go,
I'm
go
going
too
back
far.
where I was, and I kind of lost it, all the questions. So let me see. Um, oh no, okay, now I just scrolled way too high. Love Redux. Oh, any tips on testing? Are you planning course about it? No, I'm not planning course on it. What about you? Do you do testing at your work?
No, like I work on a small team, so all of it's like manual testing. We don't write any automated tests. So I think it depends on the company. And someone was saying like kind of like to the point that I'm saying, someone asked, well, why would you need jest or any of that stuff? And it really depends on your team and your project. And if it's something that's deployed all the time, and then you probably need to have some automated testing. But for us, I just click on stuff, and if it breaks, it breaks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Uh,
Okay, this is one of those loaded ones again. So we see at the end we're getting those ones. John, do you think 1 year is enough to study and practice to get a job as a junior web developer without experience? I just graduated last August and currently on your JavaScript course. As far as I understand, the original comment was hello from Philippines. So assuming that you are from Philippines, I it's impossible for me to answer whether 1 year is enough. It depends on how much time you have to study. If you're pretty much doing that full time, that sounds like a lot of time to kind of to give you up and running and everything. If you're doing that really, like full time, whatever hours. And but it depends on your like who is hiring, what is happening over there. I cannot tell you whether that is enough or that is enough because that will depend on what the how many companies are actually looking for that and if there is a market for that. That's kind of the best that I can advice that I can give. What about you?
I'm like, I mean, that's really good. Like you got it, knocked it out of the park there. Um,
Yeah,
I'm
so that's kind of it's impossible like
You can't. I'm thinking about it. It's like, how can I, how can you tell? Like for me, it took me 5 years, like 4 or 5 years. If you look at my GitHub, I started like in 2013, but I didn't get a job until 2019. And so it depends on the effort. It depends on like what you're actually doing, like what the market is there. Like there's so many different complex things. It's hard. Like to
oh
kind of guesstimate.
we have Andreas Aus from I think yeah, I think he was from UK.
Nice.
Let's put it this way. Is it a good idea to learn jQuery if it's a job offer? If it's an actual job, yes. I mean, again, I would never do that for my personal project at 2022.
Listen,
But if there's a real company who says, "Hey, can you
we use
showcase us
jQuery.
the jQuery?" Again, if you're comfortable with kind of the frameworks, you'll see that it's more about like learning these kind of, I would call them recipes more. It's not like a real like, hey, it's more like, hey, if you want to do this, then this is the syntax you should use. Not like these are the hooks that you can use with jQuery. It's not like that. So it's more about just just understanding the methods they provide. So if it's a real job offer, I would yeah, I have no problem with that.
You know what I don't like, John? Whenever you go and you search something online and you're like, "Oh, I found a solution how to do the thing," and you get excited, and then the window loads, and all you see is jQuery code, and then you're like, "Oh, gotta keep searching, gotta keep
Uh,
searching."
I had something that I wanted to say on jQuery, and I forgot. Of course, there's something that I've been either I was looking at some of the website or something where I was like, wow, they still use jQuery, and that's for me it's incredible. I would say it this way.
I mean, yeah, like
Uh,
when it was a thing, it was like solving an important issue, but then things got updated, and
yeah, no, back then the vanilla JS was in
yep,
no way,
yep.
even close. Paul is experiencing in the earthquake over there
Well, you have cats. That's what happens. I'm like,
in
no,
Texas.
no, no.
Yeah, Paul has the best cats ever. He has the black one, and or you have two black ones.
Two. I have two
Two
black
black
ones,
ones.
but
Yeah.
like they look at
For
me like,
everyone who's thinking about adopting a cat, pick a black one because for because people, I mean, again, not to go around, but because people are stupid and because of some what's the name? What's that? Um, basically, they don't get picked up in the shelters because
because of
there's
superstition or
yeah,
some
yeah,
crap. And
superstition. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
just
That's the
stupid,
word. So
stupid.
we have a black one. He's the friendliest, the best cat ever. So if you're ever adopting a cat, think of the black ones first because they're so nice and friendly and cool. So they eat a lot. My one eats a lot. He eats like a horse, but hey, he's super friendly. So and I've seen Paul's one, and they're also really cool. So yeah. Uh, where you from, John? You have a cool accent. Well, that depends who you ask about the accent part, but I'm from Latvia. I left when I was 22, I want to say. So I was 2 years in England and then rest of them in US, and we're kind of thinking right now, we're just seriously considering probably moving back to Europe at some point. It's not going to be right now, but yeah, and I don't know whether it's going to be Latvia for sure, but it's kind of everything is going towards the fact that it's probably back to Europe. So, and what about you, Paul? Tell us your story.
You just want to be with the cool kids. Gotcha.
No, but I don't know. This is kind of like once you get kids, it's different as
Yeah.
far as
Yeah. And
you.
if you still have a lot of family there, that also, you know,
Yeah, no, you want
makes sense.
I want my kind of kids to be more closer to grandma because it's
Yeah,
not
exactly. It makes
it's
sense.
one thing that people I think misunderstand a little bit. And by the way, we're 10 o'clock. Can we go a little bit more, Paul?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Are you
yeah.
okay?
No big deal. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, as far as once you get let's say from US, just going for a holiday, it's impossible for Europe because not only for two people you need to schedule, you need to like come up with okay, when are we can take the vacation? You're not gonna go there for 1 week. I'm not gonna
No,
fly pretty much
no,
24 hours with
no. Yeah,
with a toddler or maybe two kids just so I can
yeah.
spend a few days and then fly back. There's and this is kind of over the years, it just gets more and more annoying. So it's definitely again, I cannot pinpoint, but it's definitely in the works that we will be somewhere closer to where basically we're originally from. So please make a YouTube course on Redux and Toolkit. Uh, I made a Redux video and wasn't picking up any views, and so I'm not sure how much I'm gonna go. For now, everything is gonna be as far as I just started with Mern, so next few videos on YouTube for sure will be Mern, and then we'll see. Uh, as an example, when what would need use Redux instead of context. Uh, Again, most likely as your application grows bigger, it's really as that simple. I mean, and once you get more people working on a code for sure, because it's user reducer is very nice structure for yourself if you're on your own. That's definitely adds some, a little bit of more where you don't accidentally update the state values and all that. But I mean, Redux is still used in companies where you have way more people because I mean, it's first of all, it's older than user reducer, so you cannot really compare them to. But and when it comes to context, um, yeah, it's again for me for personal project, I rarely see that difference between hey, I'm gonna use context and use reducer, and then I'm gonna use full blown Redux. Like I've
Yeah,
never, and there's actually a big movement where very very smart people are not I wouldn't say against it, but they're like this is just some stuff that it was kind of told to us that we need to do it, but you can build without it. So that's why I'm always when I talk about having personal projects, I I just say yeah, you should learn Redux, but I don't know whether you should be using it as far as your projects. If you can just use context and use reducer, I think you can get away with a lot of stuff. If you want to showcase that you know Redux, then it's a different thing. What do you think?
my company, like uh, the application that another team was working on, required Redux because they had very complex forms where you click one thing and they'll update like a data table somewhere else, like and bunch of other things. So they needed a reason. And for the application that I was working on, like we don't use Redux at all. We just use the basic stuff with React. Um, but like I said, depends like what you're building. Which is funny right now. I'm like doing a lot of GraphQL, so I don't use like Redux. There's no need for it because GraphQL has its own state. from a Apollo client. So
Yeah, that's actually something that I want to pick Paul's brain about the GraphQL, because
yeah.
that's something that I'm really interested in. I want to see like kind of how he applies that in production.
So on
We
the front end is good, but if you have to make an API with using GraphQL, it's way more work than it needs to be.
then
I
then
still like it. I still like it. Don't get me wrong, but it's
but
way more work.
But let me ask you a question. You use Strapi. So I know that in Strapi, as far as I remember, there was a way where you just get the plugin and you
Oh,
are
it works beautifully. Yeah.
sending data already in a GraphQL.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what you is that something that you're doing and then you're just consuming on a front end?
Yeah, so basically, I got the plugin for Strapi, which basically allows you to use and make GraphQL queries or mutations to that endpoint. And on the front end, I'm using Apollo client, and then
Mm,
it works really nice. Like I really like it. So like I know we have our discussions with about Strapi, but like one plus for Strapi, if someone's a front end developer and they're learning about REST APIs, easy setup with Strapi, and then easy to set up GraphQL with Strapi. So if you want to learn REST and then see how it's done differently with GraphQL, it's easy to do. As long as you're not making anything too complex. You know.
yeah, no, no, no. Those are two couple of like Strappy is great for, again, my issue kind of comes with those updates and
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
when you have to host it. That's
Yeah.
kind of my two bones that I would pick with them. But
Yep.
as far as learning, Paul is exactly correct. Where you can get the Strappy and just start testing on the front end where you already have the working API, right? You don't
Yeah.
even have to set it
You don't
up.
have to do anything.
You don't need to learn or whatever Node Express. You already have the routes, the endpoints. You can test it out the login, the authentication,
Yeah.
all of those things, and you can practice with the post request. So
Yep.
when you are adding the content to the CMS, so no, for that it's extremely cool. And
Yeah.
one thing about GraphQL, that's kind of the best uh, thing that I would say as far as Gatsby, because if you learn Gatsby, it has the easiest kind of, in my opinion, learning curve to kind of guide you through the GraphQL. It's just because it's literally just about consuming. You don't
Yeah.
have to worry about setting up.
Sorry about
You
those
just need
details.
to learn that it is a structured data. It's not like, hey, I'm gonna get all the posts with all the fields. No, it's like,
You
okay,
just
I'm
get
gonna
what you
get the
want.
posts, but I'm gonna get either the title and stuff along those lines. So that's kind of that big thing that you need to wrap your head around, where it goes like, instead of this, whatever, I'm getting all the GitHub users. Now I'm being very, very specific, and
Yeah.
therefore, for me, Gatsby was this thing where prior to that there was no really need for me GraphQL, and that was just, there was no other way. So
Yeah.
if you want to kind of learn GraphQL and understand it, I would definitely say, if you're a front end developer, go with Gatsby, and you'll do both things at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Um,
really like GraphQL. Like my personal like path in development, I'm trying to get more into backend. So I use Strapi, and it's great because it made the transition to Node a little bit easier because now I understand like what the backend does. And so my goal is to get better with Node REST API, and then eventually do GraphQL on the back end, which I've done some projects that I followed along, and man, there's way more work than REST API, but it's still good because at the end, it's like you have this amazing thing, you know.
yeah, no, no, that sounds very, very cool. So we have our usual. I think we're getting this once in every live stream. Are you brothers? You just look the
It
same.
was just, yeah, yeah. It's that, being
I,
from that other part of the world,
yeah, I think
you know.
that's kind of, once you cross the Atlantic Ocean, then everybody looks at you and they're like, "Oh, you look the same," and
You
it's
know what
like,
it is? It's
well,
the years of pessimism living in that part
they're
of the
written on
world
our
that,
faces.
yeah, it's written in our face. My fiance is like, "Paul, you're always so serious." I'm like, "I'm happy right now. I don't know what you're talking about. You look like, but that's just like that,
Okay,
Slavic face, I guess.
this is now that John mentioned football, soccer in parentheses. I would love to know which team he follows. Arsenal. I When I started, there was the whole array of my favorite players, starting with Thierry Henry, and he just kind of went with it. I know they stink at the moment, and pretty much since, I mean, there has been a time since they're not as powerful as they used to be by any stretch of imagination. But yeah, it's still for me Arsenal. I kind of grew up with that team, so I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. In general, I just like the pace of the game, how it's played especially in like in England. I just really enjoyed it. So
I'm laughing because I'm Russian, right? But I live in US most of my life. But then I had friends who are off the boat Russian. Like if you know what that expression means, it's basically people that
yeah.
just recently got here and they're
Mm.
kind of like whatever rough around the edges. You know, they will all come to play soccer. You'll see a bunch of black BMWs, all these hard looking kids. And so one time they invited me to play soccer and or football. And so I start in the middle of the field and I had the best strategies, just stay in one place and don't do anything because the ball goes back and forth so many times. And everybody's like, wow, I'm like, oh my God, no wonder these people are in shape. It's such a hard game, such a hard
Yeah, no,
game.
no, no. There's
It's
I
it's a very physical game.
in
It's insane.
Chicago, I did also play it in one of those, what they're called, like beer leagues. You know, when you
Yeah,
get like,
yeah, yeah,
I don't know, five whatever people together, and then you play again. That it was so funny because initially I was like, "So how long is the game?" And the guy's like, "Well, it's 2 times 15." But that was, I already joined them on a second game of the
yeah.
tournament. He's like, "But trust me, those 2 times 15, you'll die." And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, 2 times 15 was more than
Yeah,
enough.
it's an
That, but
intense game. Uh,
okay, we have a mm, okay. I do have a quick question though. Ba, ba, ba. That, okay, I don't understand this question. Again, we have one loaded one. How much time should an aspiring developer spend on HTML and CSS before moving to JS and React? I'm trying to mentor someone and I feel they're losing interest due to the length of initial course. This is a very good one. This is a very, very good one. So I'm still that of a mindset that yes, you should like build small things, and that's something that I actually want to add to my HTML and CSS course. Where after each section, I wanna when we're learning CSS, I want to add like a small, let's say you learned about, I don't know, min and max. So try to build like a small card or whatever, something like that. And so for sure that, in my opinion, and I still push towards doing something like at least one big project where you can practice the flex and grid and all that. Uh, if somebody's getting disinterested, you can get them onto a JavaScript already, where they will still need to practice HTML and CSS in order to learn that. But if person is getting disinterested, then you need to also understand that JavaScript is way longer to learn than HTML and CSS because there and there it's way more complex in my opinion. Not again, I'm not saying it's tough to make a nice looking layout. I'm not saying that people who use HTML and CSS don't know anything what they're doing, but I'm saying from perspective of learning, JavaScript has way more kind of, like closures. Right? It's not the same as, hey, this is the CSS property and this is what it does, and maybe you get some use case where it's kind of hard to understand. No, those are kind of like complex things in my opinion that you really need to wrap your head around. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, with JavaScript, there's just so much stuff that you're just gonna keep learning. I mean, like learning's like this and binding and all that other stuff that took me a while to kind of wrap my head around. And so like I do get the point where they say like people lose interest, but I think like I had points in my learning where I didn't want to continue to learn. Like it's not all like cupcakes every day. You're having fun learning. Like you're gonna have days where things are gonna be hard, and that's just the nature of it. And like a lot, like I remember I had a friend who was mentoring me And I remember watching him talk about coding, and I would literally not be paying attention to him like at all, like just because I was like, I don't understand, like
Mhm.
this doesn't make sense to me. And you just have to kind of like understand that's part of the thing. Like if someone thinks it's like everything's fun all the time, that's just not true. Like, it's like it's hard. So basically, like if you feel bored, at least for me, like I'll just be like, let me take a break and then try something new, or try like a different thing, or try to build like a little, like you were saying, do like a smaller project, build like either little HTML thing or CSS thing. But yeah, like I get bored a lot also learning to code. So I just don't stop. That's basically, my strategy
Well,
to
that
that
was one of
answer.
the things that one of the tips that I think the first one that we recorded, because it's always nice and cute in the beginning. You learn a few things, you build some stuff, but in
Yeah.
general, there's this continuous process of trying to get something done, and being met with obstacles, and it's frustrating sometimes. Again,
Yeah.
the worst one actually for me is when I record a course project and I'm already done with recording, and then I find like a bug, and I'm like, all right, I already recorded. Now I have to go back, and then like you spend 2 3 hours, and then I'm happy that I got that bug, because I learned something in the process. But that first thing, annoying thing, you're like, well,
Yeah.
now I have to like go back, figure out, and usually it's like it's not that it's it's was somewhere in the beginning. I mean, I do
Yeah. Yeah.
record. It's more like I'm already done technically with this one, but then in the last video there's some kind of bug that I need to solve, and but I
The-
always, after those 3 hours sometimes, I'm like, you know what? At least I learned this and this and this in the
yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I think that never stops.
No.
I
Yeah.
don't see anybody being like, yeah, there's some things that you have done already so many times that you know already all the kind of hidden things that can hit you, but it's never that you're like, no, I just know everything,
I know
and
everything now.
this is gonna be, I think there's always gonna be something like that.
Yeah, and I think like for me, like when I know making improvements is when I'm able to look things up faster. I'm like, it's because you know what the problem is at least, where
Mm.
before you're like, what was the issue? Now coding, it's like to me, like it's like it's just exercise in frustration sometimes, and like it's like one of the things that happens to me all the time is sometimes I forget that I don't have autosave on my VS Code, and so I'll do something, I'll run it, and it works, and then I'll do something else, you know, and I forget to save it, and then I'll go like to like run it again, but I changed something and now it's broken, and then I have no idea like what I did, and I'm like, what the hell? And you just try to go back and like figure out and what have you. That's why like people, you like use Git on your personal projects, people, like, and make sure you work in different branches so you at least have some sort of history of what you did, because at the beginning I used to like delete everything and try again, which is not like the best strategy, but it's
Yeah,
insane.
no, Git is another topic that we
Yeah,
can
yeah,
make
that's
the
very important.
entire thing, and it's still not gonna be enough. By the way, I want to jump in with this one. So remember how we kept getting these Next.js questions
Yeah.
about the images? So one person is just saying use predefined component image of Next.js, and I really want to jump on that. So my point is, at least in Gatsby, I know for sure that there's a way how you can just get the image using the Webpack. Basically, you import like you do with React. Don't do that. Use the Gatsby one where it's out. So if you're not using Next.js optimizations, then
It's not gonna
you'll
work.
have the same problems that like Create React have.
React has,
So
yeah.
I don't know whether that's the issue for people that were asking the question, but if you do need to use what's kind of you know made for that problem instead of just using the React approach. Pa, pa, pa. I think that's about it. I think
Tammy has a good question. She says, John Paul, side discussion in chat, but is some type of game project to be included or avoided in portfolio? A lot of us think they show great skill, others said to avoid. Any downside you guys know of?
uh for me it's just jumping around, unless you have a clear purpose on on what you're trying to let's say if there's a clear like company that you want to do and they are working with JavaScript games, then yes. Apart from that, for me, this is again comes down to what me and Paul were talking about prior to the live stream and also during, about saying no to things, because you can go so many directions. I would first start by sticking to kind of making web dev projects actually, and then if you have time, if you have interest in that, if that's something that you can spend a little bit of time, you can make a game and you can make a case like, hey, I understand this. But at the same time, then I can make an argument that there's other things that you can do where you can also showcase your knowledge of JavaScript, not just making games. For me, I'm always personally have kind of stayed off the games, um, because I just found that to have those projects, the web dev projects, actual projects, to be more relevant in what is useful. So, what do you think? I need to remove one person who is
Yeah,
just.
like to me, it's like, yep, spamming like an idiot. It's two different domains. Like I have friends who do JavaScript games, and that requires a different level of skill. And actually, making games is like not only different domain, it's like more difficult because it's different requirements. And I think you know you can't be good at everything. So like I have friends who make games and they make games. That's like their profession. So they're good at that. So whenever they like I see what they do, like I personally can't do what they do. And at the same time, if you ask them to, do some of this web development stuff, they're like, that's not our domain. Like, yeah, we could learn it, we could do it, but it's you can't be good at both, at least for me. And so for me, like I just, kind of have to be like, look, this is not something I do on day-to-day basis. So for me to be good at it, like, I don't expect it. And, that's why I focus on web development stuff because of my job. That's what I do. And like I had this question a bunch of times. And for me, again, I'm 41, a little bit older. I want to make sure that I'm good at my current job. I want to make sure that I keep improving in my current job. So everything that I do in coding at home revolves around like what specific skills can I improve that will improve up my work. And that's basically kind of like my thought on that. But I wish I had more time. Like I would love to make games, but I just have to kind of, I can't be good at everything. And and you could tell like I'm not good at that part of the stuff. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that kind of gets us to the end. Again, thank you everyone from coming and asking questions and participating in the chat. I will repeat, I understand that a lot of you live in very different places than me and Paul, and um, you staying up or getting early for us, just it's awesome.
It's
We really
amazing. Yeah. It's
appreciate
amazing.
that, and I want to say thank you to Paul for joining me here, and just making this a very very useful kind of experience for everyone. And you want to sound off?
Yeah, like well, I want to say a huge thank you to you. And every time I see the comments, like I know you wouldn't like to talk about it, but you changed so many people's lives, and it's just amazing to see how much appreciation you have, and you know like it's just amazing. And like I told this story many times, but your React course helped me a lot, especially landing my first React job. So if you guys out there learning to code, like don't give up, push through. There's a lot of frustration, obviously, a lot of hard work that goes into it. But if I could do it, I wouldn't be surprised you guys could do it because, like like I try to present the best image of myself because I don't want to scare everybody with like you'll be like, oh my god, like he's as smart as a goat, so it's like you guys will be able to do it. And basically, thank you, John. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for joining us, letting two guys speak their mind, talk about their opinions,
Yes,
and hopefully
yes.
some valuable advice, that could help
Hopefully.
you.
And the next
Hopefully.
stream is going to be on Monday at 8 o'clock. So
Yep.
every Monday at 8 o'clock Pacific time, we do this, and we're very happy to see everyone around the world, starting with
Yep.
with US and then
Yep.
pretty much every other country. So
Yeah. Hit every
yeah,
time zone.
thank
Perfect.
you guys for coming. We had a blast. Hopefully you did
Oh yeah,
too.
always fun, always fun. Yeah, I'm always happy. As long as that's it. Let's do this every Monday. Good,
Yep, yep.
good,
That's the plan. Okay,
good.
let me